The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live on this very last day in April. We have an incredible show planned for you today. I promised you that we were going to do April and we were going to go out with a bang, and we're going to deliver that today. We thank you so much for being here. We are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. We're going to be with you not just for the next 2 hours, but actually we're going to be live for the next 3 hours. We have so much show for you that we couldn't pack it into 2 hours for you. And I'm going to go through some of the different things that are going to be happening here during this hour. But I want to start by reminding you that this entire show is meant to be interactive. We hope that you will participate with us. We're dying to hear what's on your mind, what questions you have, what topics you would like to see covered. Emily is going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can get in touch with us, some of the different ways that you can be watching the show. While she does that, I will remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go to that page, please take a look. If you click on the upper corner where it says blog, you'll be able to download a free meditation for overwhelmed parents. We'd love to know your thoughts on that. And as I've been promising you, we have the child version for meditation for children that's going to be coming to you very soon. It's already been recorded. We're in post-production. It's on its way. But on that homepage itself, you'll see a desktop. On that desktop, there's a computer. If you click on the triangle on the computer screen, you can be watching the live show with us or the most recently recorded live show. And to the side of that, there are a series of white boxes. If you put your cursor in the box that says your question, you can start typing, hit enter, and your question will appear here on my screen. During a live show, that gives you the opportunity to be asking our experts questions in live time. It's completely free. There is no login. We don't take any personal information from you at all. It doesn't put you on a list at all, which is really remarkable. You have complete anonymity unless you choose to disclose to us how to get back in touch with you. And some of you like to do that so that we can be having an ongoing conversation off camera. You're welcome to do that. We totally appreciate that. If you do share that information, we will not share it with the audience at home. That's our pledge to you. So we hope that you will participate. I mentioned big show today. In this first hour, we're going to have Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh, a true expert in the field of autism, a visionary in the field of autism. She answers your questions live. And because this is the last day of April and we wanted to do an extra special big show, we've asked her and some other guests to talk to us about what's cutting edge, what's happening, what advances are happening in the field of autism. Dr. Granpeesheh is going to be talking with us during this hour about something she's really excited about, a way to further your teaching opportunities in a really fun and reinforcing way for your kids. So we're going to be talking about that sort of at the bottom of the hour here. In the second hour, during Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, Dr. Andrew Levenson is going to be with us. He is an amazing physician that I know many of you have heard of. This is our first opportunity to talk to him live. He's going to be talking about advances in the biomedical treatment of autism. He's a true expert in that field, and I know you're going to find it really exciting. And then in our third very special hour, we're going to have David Humphrey with us. He is the CEO of Kirkman Labs, and he is going to be talking with us about autism trends in prediction and prevention. Yes, I said prevention. He's got a new study that's going to be coming out in Pediatrics Magazine that is potentially a game changer. So we can't wait to talk with him. We're going to do a full hour with him during the noon hour here, Pacific time. We know that you're going to have questions for all of our guests. So please participate, be with us today. And it's time for Ask Dr. Dorene.
Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Dorene is an expert in autism.
Dorene Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Dorene.
Welcome to Ask Dr. Dorene. We want to welcome Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh.
Thank you. Good morning.
This last day of April, it's been a very busy month for everyone.
Is that why I'm so exhausted?
Yes, it is. It's exactly
it.
why. Most of us, I mean, it's a very exciting month for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of attention paid. We all appreciate that. But I think we're all ready to get back to the day-to-day autism awareness. I mean, every day is that for all of us who are in this community. But it sort of kicks up 7 notches in April.
Absolutely.
I sort of feel like it's like having guests over to your house where you clean extra good and you want to be on your best behavior and have them look and see exactly what you want them to see.
No, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you're ready for the guests to go home because you have to get back to what business at hand, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's just, and yes, you're right, of course, we do so much in this month, but it's just so amazing for me to think back and realize how very little recognition autism had. And now, I mean, and I really just, you know, publicly want to thank Autism Speaks because they are responsible for this. They're responsible for us having April 2nd as a day for autism and also the entire month of April. And I think the incredible amount of attention they've brought to this problem is just spectacular.
It is. And I will say there are a lot of people say, autism awareness, aren't we done with autism awareness? And I will tell you from my view of this, we are not anywhere near done. And that is evidenced by a story that we are going to answer some of your questions, but I have to start with, selfishly, with one of my own that I think will benefit all of us. We see in the news yesterday that the governor in the state of Maine decided, even though the legislature of the state of Maine, with an overwhelming majority, brought a bill to his desk that would increase the cap so it would no longer stop at age 5 for autism coverage. It would now go to age 10. They put that bill on his desk, and he vetoed it.
Yeah.
I went into mourning last night and this morning over it. I thought, this is horrifying. How could any responsible person in the know do that? And what I arrived at, Dr. Granpeesheh, is that it's ignorance, pure and simple ignorance. And I wanted you to take a minute this morning to talk about why it's so important that we not stop at 5.
Oh yeah, you know, it is. It's so critical to provide care for our children to the point that they need it. And, you know, that's a pretty broad statement. And I'll be honest, recently, just because last week I had been up in Sacramento and met with the Commissioner of Insurance and so on, and we decided that we should come back and take a look at how the different states and how the different insurance companies and how also the different, you know, in California, the regional centers or Department of Developmental Services fund our kids. And the intent is always, of course, that when a law takes place or let's say these insurance mandates, they go through state by state, the intention is always the same thing. We want to be able to provide the medically necessary treatments for all of our kids, no matter where they live. But it often gets interpreted quite differently and incorrectly, I should say. And as a result, then all these caps are placed. Like right now, we're having an issue in New York where there's a cap of dollar amount, and that is really not, the federal laws won't allow caps, because otherwise, if you do put a cap on it, then there's no equality or parity in regards to the treatment of autism and any other disorder, and there has to be parity. So I remember years ago, to be honest with you, when first the Arizona mandate was written, and that was one of the very, very first, I came back and there was a cap of, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 50,000 up to the age of 8 or 9 I think, and then 25,000 from the age of 10 to 18 or 16 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but there were caps associated with age. And I remember the very first thing that Bryce Myler, who's our resident expert, said to me was, well, this isn't going to hold up. Like, there's no way that's going to happen because federal parity won't let this happen. And she was so right that You know, and the fact that the legislature didn't know what Bryce knew is actually why they passed the mandate, right? And then we come back to find that they can't. And they had to, of course, remove the caps, and it was fabulous. And so I'm pretty sure that this situation in Maine, I don't think it'll survive. I'm not sure. You know, the fact that they're going in with a bill to expand means that families have been having problems. And to be able to really, to be honest with you, you know, thinking of cutting services at 5 is so ludicrous.
It's cruel to me. It seems cruel.
It's almost like, you know, we're going to give you like dental care. We're going to give you a root canal, and we're going to do everything we need except for put the actual cap on.
Right.
And so it's kind of like we're going to spend 2 years or so treating your child, but then in their last year where they really need it, just as much as the first few years, but I mean, to be able to actually have an active, adaptive life after that, we're going to pull services. So 5 is a pretty... I don't know where that number even comes from. It doesn't make any sense at all, right? But you know, reading some of the literature around what just happened in Maine, I think what the governor was trying to do there, or so it is implied in the articles, is that he was trying to improve the state-mandated coverage in a way that people would actually turn to the state-mandated coverage and not private insurance coverage. So I'm not sure if he had good intentions, if he was really ignorant about the treatment of autism. Either one would not surprise me, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I find that a lot of people, you know, I'll give an example which is sort of just as horrific, I suppose. A lot of our children, I was looking the other day and noticed that the vast majority of our children, we have a very large number of kids, right? We have about 1,000 kids on insurance alone. And when I look at their numbers, it scares me because I see that they are, the vast majority are getting lower than 20 hours a week. And when I look at reasons and so on for denial, just yesterday I met with a family that had gone through pretty much every bad thing that can happen to a family. Very fabulous family, which, by the way, at some point you should also talk to them. But wonderful people, and have 2 children, and have gone through crazy ride with Kaiser, denying them coverage for both kids. I mean, really ridiculous stuff. But regardless, when you look at it, you realize that almost all the kids out there, even though there is a mandate to cover them, they're really not getting enough. And even if they are, they're cut very rapidly, and the excuse is usually not medically necessary. And so it all boils down to the definition of what is medically necessary, and there's a lot of subjectivity around that and a lot of arguments and discussions around that concept. And the fact is, ABA, you know, even if you divide it into 2 types and say it's the early intervention type is supposed to be very comprehensive, all of that is medically necessary. Every aspect of it, every hour of it for 3 or 4 years is medically necessary. And even when it becomes focused, which is a lower amount of intensity, then all of that is medically necessary. And what's really unfortunate is that I think in the field itself, in the behavior analysis field itself, people are not really understanding that 40-hour a week, or that, you know, 30 to 40-hour a week is the gospel.
It's a prescription.
It is a prescription. It's a dosage that's very, very important, and you can't just randomly assign lower hours to our kids.
There's no science to show that lower hours is effective. This is what I don't
it's
understand.
unbelievable. This family yesterday, so this is now their, I think, 2nd child. First child is only receiving 10 hours a week, which I don't understand at all. And I said to the, through the regional center actually system, because Kaiser has just given them the runaround, and I talked with the family, and the dad was saying that the provider who's providing these services to them, who's a vendor of the regional center, family asked the provider and said, would you please ask for more hours on our behalf, because this is a child who's barely 4. He's not even 4 yet. And the provider said, to be honest with you, I don't think that there's any case that would justify more than 5 or 10 hours a week of ABA. And that's a BCBA who said that. And that just makes me really angry.
That makes me really angry too. And I want to say to all the people at home, we need to start calling those providers out. And there's a great way you can do it on Love My Provider.
That's right.
Start calling those providers out. Go to lovemyprovider.com. Call those providers out so that families don't vendor with them.
But the problem I have, Shannon, is that a lot of families don't even really realize.
They don't know.
Like when I look at our families, I mean, we're starting. We have 200 kids. We're starting right now, right? Because we have a massive wait list, and I really felt bad about it. So I basically, as Sangam says here, you know, we started the SEAL Team 6 or something, and we have a whole ton of people doing intakes right now and starting all these families. And I, you know, the families are saying things like, well, you know, I don't have time. We don't really have more than 10 hours of availability, and even though we have more funny, and we want to, and you know, we also want to do things that are fun and kind of stuff like that. And so they will never give us more than the very minimum in terms of availability. Are you kidding? I can't even get families to pull their child out one time per month for 2 hours to come to clinic.
Okay.
Out of school.
We have work to do.
Oh, we have work to do.
We have work to do on all ends of it. And meanwhile, we have viewers who would give everything they have to have that opportunity, to have the opportunity of more than 10 hours, to have the opportunity to go to a clinic with people from CARD.
Right.
So we need to all band together, solve these problems case by case, individual by individual, and educate everyone.
Right.
I'm right back on that awareness. We do need more awareness of what works and what we can do. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to rapid fire go through a bunch of questions, because at the bottom of the hour, we're going to give Dr. Granpeesheh an opportunity to talk about a new way that we can maximize learning opportunities in a way that's really fun and gives you an opportunity to do, you know, whatever it is you have to do. Open the mail, maybe cook dinner, maybe get the dishes done. It's exciting, so stick with us.
Hello, fellow activists. In our last segment, we talked about step number 4, run your own race, don't compare. Your child has their individual journey. Moving on to step number 5, shore up spiritually. Now, spirituality is a very loaded word. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I'm not talking about religion in the traditional sense. I'm talking about a practice, a belief system, or a ritual that speaks to your soul. Now, that doesn't have to be found in a church or a synagogue, although it may well for you. It could be found out in nature. Your altar could be a redwood tree. Your hymns could be birds singing overhead. It's different things to different people. In the early days of Wyatt's autism, I don't know how I could have survived without my church. In addition to dealing with his diagnosis, I was dealing with my husband's battle with cancer, the aging of my parents who lived across the country, and their eventual passing. I knew I could find peace, at least for an hour and a half, sitting in the pew of my church. See, anything can become a spiritual practice if you approach it that way. And for me, it wasn't found in a sermon or in a religious doctrine, but in my fellow man. We'll talk more about that next. In the meantime, find out what speaks to your soul and keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live. This is a very special day here. It's the last day of April, so we wanted to do this big. We're starting with Ask Dr. Dorene. Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh is here. She's answering your questions. We're thrilled about that, and I want to get through as many of them as I possibly can today. I want to start with a long series of emails that I've been having with one mom this last week, and there were many, many questions, and I'm not going to go through all of her questions, but to a very fine point, she wants to know what the benefits and the drawbacks are to inclusion. And we had Dr. Mike Doresian a couple of months ago talking about this, and one of the things that he said that really struck me that I never really got before was this idea that good inclusion is amazing and we should all be fighting for that for our kids that can handle it. But his point to me was good inclusion doesn't exist in an awful lot of places.
It's true.
That made me sad, and and here I've got a mom, and she's saying to me, my gut instinct is that her child is in a special day class. He's not being pushed. During recess, he's not talking and interacting with other peers, although he can. She's asked the teacher, can you address this? The teacher has said, I have 15 kids. I can't do more.
This, yeah.
Right? But everything that she's saying, my cautionary thing is that it doesn't sound like to me that this school can even do a special day class, let alone good inclusion.
Right.
So when a parent is faced with that, she sees a child who's just, they've already identified that he's 2 to 3 years behind, but he's very capable. What can she do? Does she fight for the inclusion? Does she leave him in the special day class, or does she start looking for another school?
Okay. So this is, it's one of those questions.
Can I say this before?
Sure.
We have not taken the time today to say and remind everybody, no one can give child-specific advice
Yes,
within the confines of the show.
course.
So having said that,
Yes, of course.
it would be a disservice. But go ahead.
I won't be, and I'm not really responding specifically to this person, this mom, but I think that you yourself and this mom, if you step back from it for a moment, you'll have the answer.
Okay.
So what is the reason that we do all this intensive behavioral therapy? Why do we do it?
Well, for me as a parent, I want to take the obstacles away from my child so that he can do all the things that he wants to do, whatever that may be, without an obstacle that prevents him from being able to access what he wants.
Exactly. So being able to access the things in his life and, have sort of integrate into all the things that are in his environment could also be called what? Inclusion.
Inclusion,
Right.
Exactly.
So the issue of inclusion is one of our endpoints. It's one of our goals. So now you go back and you look at the spectrum of kids on this with autism, right? And you have some children that are very severely affected, and then some children that are very mildly affected. And hopefully every child goes from this end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, or as far as they can go.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's with good behavioral therapy and other things that we all believe in, medication if necessary, and dietary and all these things. Now, if you are doing this and the child is, as they progress, right, they age into school age, right? So initially, and that's why I like to get kids so early, because you really want to just have as many hours as you can with the child yourself.
Yeah.
Just at, intensive ABA, teaching them and trying to catch them up. That's what you're trying to do, catch them up. So if you start to get into school age, 3, 4, 5, depends on the state you're in, and you start integrating in. Now, your choices vary from special education to regular education, and then there's a whole bunch in between. So you can have special ed being the most restrictive, and that different types of classrooms, obviously. At this point, I think the majority of the classrooms are non-categorical, so they're mixed or autism classrooms, but within the setting of a regular ed school. So very few schools are full autism or full DD schools. They still are there. Yeah. So that would be probably the most restrictive, and then the next one would be like a classroom which is special ed with some pull-out into the regular ed. The next one might be, reverse. So you're in a regular ed, but you pull out and reverse into special ed at certain times. Now the next one might be you're in regular ed, but you have your own aide, or you have an aide that assists you and 3 other kids. And then the next one might be you're in regular ed and you have your own aide, and then the next one would be you're in regular ed and you don't have an aide.
Right.
And that's sort of the steps, the hierarchy of going from most restrictive to least restrictive.
Right.
And the real answer to your question, and for this family and any family, is where does your child fit in best, right? All the kids are very different. So I might have a child who does best in special ed because really the delays they have, they're not really ready to benefit at all from regular ed. Or I might have a child who's going to definitely benefit from being in the regular ed with an aide. Yeah. Or I might have a child who's benefiting from going back and forth. It depends.
Yeah.
It really depends on the child And it depends on the quality of integration. Of course, it has to do with the aide who is with you. You know, an aide in school is not someone who is just watching over you for safety purposes, or just, I've been to schools to observe my kids where I've seen the public school aide outside having a cigarette. I mean, there's horrible programs for inclusion, and then there's fabulous programs for inclusion. We're very involved with inclusion at CARD, right? I mean, that's our life. We go in with our child. We don't care. We're doing everything from, I mean, our inclusion program even has a stage change where we go from a known aide to an unknown aide, so the child doesn't even realize there's someone in the classroom for them. Right. And then we graduate, or most of the time the kids figure that out, but still. And we'll even have aides in the classroom who are helping the teacher in general and not trying to focus on our child. But I mean, we will do everything to make it a shaping schedule so we can gradually fade out. So the answer is really, you have to look at your child and always place them in a setting that is slightly above what they're capable of, so that they can learn and they can grow. The benefits, obviously, of getting your child into the fully included is that they are, you know, accessing everything that's typical around them, and they're modeling from other kids who are typically developing, and that's what we're shooting for. The downside to being in special ed, obviously, is other children will also require a lot of attention. Other children will be acting out in millions of ways, and you will have that as a model. But hey, the upside to special ed is you get a lot more attention from one-to-one attention than you would in a regular ed program. A lot of our kids can get lost in a regular ed program if they don't have their own person. So you have to kind of figure out what is more appropriate.
Okay. And that's not an easy thing, first to determine, but I think her gut already is telling her what she thinks should happen. But then figuring out the way to make that happen is a whole other ball of wax.
Yes, it is.
But I know, and you have said this to me before, what are we doing and when are we going to give up? And, you know, we don't give up.
We don't give up.
We don't ever give up.
And, you know, I'll be honest, like, no matter where we are, and, you know, CARD's all over the place now, and so we have a much bigger, stronger presence in California. Obviously, we have, I don't know, 14 or something clinics in California, and we're growing. But wherever we are, even if we just have your family, one family in a state, we will go to bat on this.
There you go.
And we will go and talk to the school, meet with the school. All of our supervisors do this routinely. They're involved in the IEPs, they talk to the schools, they will really get on your side and help you with this. But parent advocates are also extremely helpful. FEET groups, and if there are any in your state, are very, very helpful. In California, obviously, the regional centers actually provide advocacy for this sort of thing.
Yep, it's time to armor up and get ready to go in and, as we say, get your dress dirty. That's, that's what's going to happen. All right, we're going to take a short break and come back with another question right after these messages.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ackerman. Welcome back to another Talk of Fact. We bring you the most common questions and share those answers that help your journey along for you and your family. One of the most common questions we hear all the time is, why are these doctors working with kids on the autism spectrum so expensive? Well, there's a simple answer. Kids with autism take more time, and unfortunately, if you look at a regular pediatrician's practice, they may see anywhere from 30 to 60 patients every day. So you may get at most 3 to 5 minutes with those doctors. With doctors that specialize in autism, they're called MAPS doctors, the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs. They spend quite more time with each family and each patient. And that could be an hour to an hour and a half for each family that is actually being spent just talking about your child, looking at labs. So why are they more expensive? Well, your pediatrician probably gets paid a lot more per hour based on the number of people they see. A MedMaps doctor is solely dedicated to what you're doing and what your child needs. So look at it this way. If you're spending time with your MedMaps doc and you're working with that doc, and you will literally on average see somewhere between 4 to 7 hours per year. And then don't forget that other fact we talked about, how to get the best possible healthcare reimbursement, so you can make sure that that time is well spent, not only getting answers but also reimbursed by health insurance. So there, another very detailed long fact from Taka Facts.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Because this is the last day of the month, we're doing a special expanded show, a total of 3 hours today with some really incredible guests. This hour, Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh. Next hour, Dr. Andrew Levenson. And then in our third special hour, we're having David Humphrey. This is an amazing opportunity to ask 3 incredible experts in this field important questions. And we are going to get back to the questions for Dr. Granpeesheh, but we also wanted to give her an opportunity. In this 3-hour special, we're talking about things that are hot, advances in the field of autism. And when I asked you, okay, what's exciting, what do you want to talk about, you said to me, and I was surprised, but I thought it was really wonderful, you said games. So tell us why this is what's exciting for you.
So it's funny because, you know, a long time ago, before I even had children, there was a dad of one of the kids that I was treating who was trying to show me some computer stuff and how he was trying to get his son to pay attention to them and learn from them. And this was way back, you know, and then my kids grew up, and of course with my kids, you know, there were discs and you'd pop a disc in and it was like Elmo doing a bunch of stuff. And I realized very quickly how much kids love to learn from these things. I mean, it was easier for my children to learn, let's say, alphabet from Elmo than from me.
Yeah.
You know, the way we learned it, right? So it had always been a thought of mine, and the biggest thing with games for me was that I see the changing sort of environment of funding, and I saw it with all the school district funding and the regional center funding, of course, which was at some point covering 100% of kids, and now it's down to 30% of kids. And I know the same thing will happen. It's already happening with insurance coverage. And so I worry about the children out there who are really benefiting from these programs, but we always seem to have to prove, even though, you know, everybody knows ABA is effective, the Surgeon General has said all the mandates are supposed to cover it, it's still, it really isn't effective when you do it at 10 hours. It really isn't, and that's what really concerns me the most, because I'm afraid in 2 years, with the data that's coming out right now, we'll look back and say, oh, yeah, it didn't work. Let's get rid of this, you know? And it works, but you have to do it intensively.
Yeah.
So all of that said, I, you know, just thinking, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? I suddenly realized, and plus, of course, it's costly, right? So you want to try to reduce the manpower required for this. So I suddenly thought, you know what, we're not a gaming company, but we have some really very smart people here, and you're about to meet one of them, who's just an awesome guy. And to be able to present games to our kids, build games or applications or games that they can play, because look at, you know, it's funny, every time I do an intake, the child starts to tantrum or something, they get bored, and the first thing the parent pulls out is an iPad, you know.
Screen
Sit
time.
Down, here's your iPad.
It's the multi-purpose answer to everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, or in the car, long trips or whatever. You know, I was sat in my Flex, which is my family car, the other day, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I was like, I don't think we've, like in the last year and a half, 2 years, even used the DVD player in the back, which is in the seats.
Right.
You know, I was like, whatever, we're not going to need that anymore.
Right.
So, and that's the truth. People don't use DVDs anymore. Everything is on an iPad or a computer or whatever. So we started to take the very early lessons, the ones that are just a presentation of a stimulus. So they're like, you know, touch this, or whatever it is, touch red, touch green, touch an object, touch pen, touch whatever. And then we realized, well, I learned a lot from these gamers. And as you know, Shannon, we have actually a gaming department of the coolest people in the world.
It is the most incredible place to visit.
They're the best. And I'm so glad they're on the main floor, you know, because like you go in and everybody loves the gamers. Yeah. They're just fun, cool kids. And but what it is then I learned from them that there's multiple things you do on a device. Right. You don't just touch. You can also drag and drop, and you can also, there's a bunch of different things.
Yes.
They taught me these different, so you can sort, you know, and there's other aspects. So we picked 4, I think, and CJ will tell us more about it. Christopher Miyagi, who's going to come in shortly and talk to us about the stuff they've designed. And so we picked a whole bunch of the initial basic games, and we picked 4 different types of engines, or types of games.
Right.
And what the team is doing is they're loading them up, and they're on iTunes Library, and they're awesome. And they're not as fun as they could be, because there's spectacular stuff out there these days. But let me tell you, if you have a child and you give them this game and they're sitting in the car driving and doing nothing or self-stimulating, this is a much better thing, because they will learn these concepts.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing. We're trying, and what's built into the game is the discrete trial format. So
Yeah.
it's the presentation is done exactly as a therapist would present, and it modifies itself based on your response, and it allows you to pick reinforcers. I mean, we should let CJ
Yes.
so he can actually show us.
We should show it. But I love the concept of we're maximizing our time in a way that the child is ultimately reinforced.
And hopefully, we're doing research on it right now, but hopefully this will actually reduce the overall intensity that a child needs in terms of funding.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a huge advance. All right, so we're going to take a short break. We're going to bring Christopher Miyake in to talk with us and show us. He's been on the show before, but it's a really fun. Camp Discovery is the name of the game,
right.
And you can download it for free. So you should try it today. But stick with us. We're going to take a break, and we're going to bring Christopher in so we can show it to you.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The Skills Assessment and Curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes Skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The Skills Assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the Skills Assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mans, tacs, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're so thrilled that joining us in the studio now we have Christopher Miyake, and you are the director of game development. Is that correct? Do I have that even remotely right? Correct me.
The creative director.
Creative director. Goodness, I apologize, leaving out a wonderful title there. And we've had you on the show before to talk about Camp Discovery, which continues to grow. And we were just talking with Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh about how amazing these kinds of tools can be in the kids' hands. So walk us through, we have a way to share it with our viewers at home. What do we do with this program, and how can this be of use to us?
Okay. I'll start from the beginning for people that are unfamiliar with it. There's been a lot of improvements and additions since the last time I was on. Camp Discovery, I think as Dorene was just saying, takes a lot of our early curriculum and puts it into a game.
Yeah.
And so we have 10 lessons right now, with more coming. We have objects, body parts, emotions, community helpers, numbers. And in all the lessons, we have
There it is. It's, first of all, let's say it's visually beautiful. It's so stunning. I want to go in and play and go to these different places because it looks like a map and it's places to go.
Yeah.
So I think most kids are going to recognize this. They tend to, and do you agree with me, Dr. Granpeesheh? Our kids, we put this in our kids' hands and they immediately know what to do. It's like it's instinctive with them.
Somehow.
Yes, somehow they
do.
I always have to have my son explain my smartphone to me. He knows more about it than I do. But so for the parent end of it, though, what is it that they're learning when they're, what kinds of, you mentioned body parts? Yeah, show us one.
Yeah, I'll go with, so objects is a lesson, and then we have the different levels. So we have matching identicals, matching similars, we have sorting and receptive, and some of these different levels will be for the other lessons as well. And so I'll start with matching identicals. So this starts with a, like a preference assessment, and so the child will pick the different animations, and we record which ones they choose the most, and so we replay those as in between trials
as reinforcers. So the child gets to pick what visual they like.
Yeah, and what's remarkable about this is that when they get the right answer, they're going to get some more of what it is that they like.
Yeah.
Which a lot of games that you have for children, they don't see what the child likes. They're just going to give them a random thing that happens when they get the correct answer. So I love this, that it gets really child specific.
Right.
And so right now, tell us what you're doing.
So we're playing through objects, and it's going to randomly select 3 objects to begin with.
And right now you're matching the objects.
So this is matching identicals.
So initially he matched with one object out, and now there's a distractor out. So it's very much the same as what a therapist's presentation would be.
And so it's that errorless learning that we talk about before on the show. First, there's no possibility of getting it wrong.
Right.
So we're ensuring that the child gets it right. As long as the child continues to get it right, it will then make it harder. But if the child doesn't get it right, it goes back to the last place where they got it right. Is that correct?
Yeah, or it'll give you a variety of visuals, like it'll make the object bigger.
Okay.
That sort of thing.
So like if I got it wrong, or if I just waited, right now it would go from this size to the bigger size.
So it's helping me to ensure that I get it right, which we know is an important aspect of learning.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the app market is so flooded with all these education apps and increasingly more autism apps, and so when we started developing this, we had to think, what can we offer that's going to, not only differentiate us but help kids, in a more efficient way. And so we really incorporated as much as we could from all our clinical background into the prompting, the error correction, the reinforcement, to make it just a better overall learning experience for the child.
And what's fascinating for me about this is that it actually is completely mirroring what the experience would be if there was a therapist that's there. A lot of times parents will read a lesson in skills and they have problems with manipulating what you guys refer to as the stimuli.
Right.
When I watch a therapist be able to keep a child in a chair and they've got the 3 things and they they deal them out and they go, which one is this, and they pull them up and they shuffle them out. That's the overwhelming part to me, is getting the stimuli down.
Well, and getting the stimuli down in the correct order.
Yeah.
And that's what's the most important thing. It's funny because I just did a review of a child via long distance web, and I was looking at the therapist and I was like, they're not doing the 7 steps correctly. They're just not doing, they're skipping forward. And the steps are essentially that you will, just like CJ showed right now, you will first have an object on its own, and then you would have an object out with a distractor item, and multiple distractor items actually, and you want to make sure the child can touch the object, only the object, and that makes the object called a target. Then everything else that you don't name is called a distractor. And then you do the same thing with a second target. And only at that point is where you can actually start to randomly rotate 2 targets. And so this is a process that's kind of important to follow. And if you don't follow this process, then the child starts to develop sometimes this thing called win, stay, lose, shift. Well, they'll just hit what they think they should hit. And if you reward it, they'll keep going for that. And if you don't reward it, they'll switch. So if they win, they'll stay. And if
but
they
they're not
lose,
actually
they'll shift.
learning.
They're not learning at all. They're just learning to shift their response. And what we want them to learn is to listen to the label, to the word. So, you know, this is really important, I think, that these guys designed the game with the discrete trial planning underneath it. And also, as CJ said, with the reinforcers, with the error correction procedures, the prompts, all that. It's great.
And then there's an extra for people who are using skills, since I brought up skills, there's an extra added that you can do this in conjunction with your skills account, correct?
Yes, if you log into your skills account, there's the skills gamer token, which you can enter in here, and so it'll give you progress made in the game in your skills account.
Love it.
And so if you master something in here, then it can go back and fill your skills account and say, oh, this child mastered similar objects or whatever, mastered identical objects. And it's, I love how he says gamer token. This is their lingo, you know? It's like, you get a gamer token.
It's remarkable. And I can see this being used in lots of different ways. For the family that's doing that intensive ABA and, you know, you've got to get the child into the car to go over to drive over to speech, instead of having them just fuzz out during that car trip, you put this in their hands and you're building on what they were just doing in the therapist. You're making it seamless, making all those opportunities.
And of course, we didn't even have the sound on. And you have to realize this does have sound. And all the reinforcers have sound, and there's a vocal telling you what to do and so on. So it's very nice.
And if I can tell a secret, that one of the main voices that's used in this app is the voice of our fabulous Emily. That you always hear me saying, Emily, can we show this? Emily, can we do that? And it's, can we turn it on for just a second so that they can hear? Emily does a remarkable job. I always say Emily is like that wonderful combination between MacGyver and Martha Stewart. Well, it turns out she's a perfect voice over artist as well. Talking about using somebody's talents to the fullest. I don't know if we can, by the time we're done, get an opportunity to hear Emily reinforcing them and saying, you know, touch this one and great job, and it's remarkable. And it's Emily's voice, not her own voice. It's a voice that she's doing, and it's slightly skewed as well, but.
I don't know if it's coming through. Is it? Because it's shared.
I don't think it's coming through for them. If we can't hear it here, we'd have.
If you want to hear it, you can
Yes.
grab community help.
You should absolutely download it for free. It's really remarkable. Whether you're using skills or not, it's a great thing to have on your devices. But I would encourage you, get your skills account too and maximize what you're doing.
Yep.
It's so exciting, and of course there's more to come.
Yes, absolutely.
Much more to come.
So thank you for that. And I don't know if you want to mention, now that you're here, and I know we're always short on time, but real quickly, your stimulus project, or do you want to do it next time you're here? Your materials project.
I'll do that next time.
All right.
Okay. All right. We'll keep it a secret until then. Thank you so much for coming in and showing this to us. We're keeping you here because we're going to answer some more questions.
Sounds great.
We're not letting you go, but thank you so much for being here. We're going to take a break and come back with more of your questions for Dr. Granpeesheh.
Another parent wants to know, how do I find out that one thing that my kid is really good at?
Now, when they get older, they're going to kind of divide into two groups. You're going to have the kids that become verbal, and then you're going to have the kids that are nonverbal, got many more problems. Maybe they still have epilepsy or some other problem. And they kind of need different services. And the ones that get verbal, what we need to be doing with them is develop the area of strength. And that area of strength often will show up around 3rd or 4th grade, sometimes earlier. But my ability in art showed up when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, and it was always encouraged. And I was encouraged to do lots of different kinds of art. Otherwise, it would have just been endless horse heads. You know, Mother would say to me, why don't you draw a picture of a beach or something else? You want to broaden it out. If the kid's fixated on trains, let's teach reading with trains, math with trains. Tap into that fixation, but develop the area of strength. Some kids it's going to be art. Other kids it's going to be mathematics. So you got a 3rd grader who's smart in math, and he wants a 6th grade math book. Give him the 6th grade math book. Don't bore him with the baby stuff. But that kid's going to have trouble with reading, because the common thing is the uneven skills. And then you have the kids that are the history buffs, and these kids are often really good at writing skills. You tend to have uneven skills, but tap into their fixations and use those to motivate, but broaden. If he likes trains, just watching them, well, we're going to take that interest in trains to do some math with it, or maybe read about the history of the railroad. You know, tap into that motivation. One of the things I really want to talk about is we got to stretch these kids. I'm not talking about physically stretching them, mentally stretching them to do new things. I'm seeing too many kids that haven't learned how to shop, how to order food at McDonald's. So you start out, let's say it's ordering food at McDonald's or at Burger King. So you take them up there and they watch you order it. And then eventually you go in when the store's not busy, and they have to go up and order it while you're sitting at the table watching, and then you coach them. And then eventually they can go in the restaurant themselves. I can remember I was scared to go to the lumber yard alone and buy lumber. And Mother made me go. And she knew I could do it. I had bought lumber with her many times. But there's a tendency to they'll want to have somebody else there when they do it, and they've got to learn how to do things alone. And you gradually have got to kind of push it. You've got to stretch them. And I'm seeing too many kids not learning basic skills. Saw a 19-year-old honors student that actually knows how to drive that had never shopped in the grocery store all by herself. That is just ridiculous. You know, you've got to stretch them. You push too hard, they're going to be panic. And the other thing is no surprises. No surprises. I knew all about the ranch long before I went there. I talked to Ann. But if you don't stretch these kids, they don't grow.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I am here with the fabulous Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh. We're doing Ask Dr. Dorene. We wanted to get back to some of your questions. Okay, so I want to start with a question, and there's just more. You guys are writing in more. We're going to hang on to some of them for next week. A 5-year-old, she says, hi, Shannon, my 4.5-year-old son is coming along really well. He's talking more and more every day. We still have many hurdles ahead. We work on a lot of things. However, the one thing that does not seem to be getting better is the stimming. He seems to clench his fists up and feels like a bolt of energy goes through his whole body. Did you ever see this with Jem, and did anything help? I feel like this is something the kids will tease him about, and don't know if diet or anything else will help us. Any suggestions would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I do. Of course, over the years, I've seen hundreds of kids do that. This is one of two things. Okay, so it's either a surge of neurotransmitters, which a lot of our kids have this problem. So it's kind of like, it's like a shiver, right? And that's what happens to them. And you know, if it is that, then you really should just get his everything tested. Just get a blood test. Take a look and make sure that all of his all the levels of various minerals and all of his toxicity is low, and that he doesn't have a lot of metals in him, and how is his all the various things that you check on a CBC. So I would do that. I would go see is this a family in California by any chance?
They did not tell us in this particular circumstance.
This would be like just a very basic general check-in with a physician who is familiar with what to do with autism. So any of the MAPS physicians, Dr. Levenson is on the show in a few minutes, and you should discuss this with him. So sometimes it has something to do with that. Sometimes some of our kids have done that. I've seen it has to do with their retaining or retention of wanting to have a bowel movement. Oh. So it's sort of encopresis is the term for it, and it has to do with controlling bowel movements. And I don't know what your child's GI system is like, or how many times a day they go, or if it's loose or solid or normal or what, but that's the other area that I would look into. Behavior, so that's in terms of dealing with the cause. Behaviorally, we've done with our kids, we've taught them like how to, for instance, when they feel this urge coming up, like to put their hands in their pockets, kind of sit on their hands, maybe even like massage themselves, various things that'll help alleviate the need to do this. It's almost over, like almost everything else that happens with our kids. I think it's generated originally by some physiological thing, and then it becomes a learned behavior, kind of like tics.
Yes.
Tics are sort of initially started up, and then they become just generalized, and you start doing all kinds of tics. So I would treat it behaviorally the same way as you do with a tic, which is kind of have the person become more aware of it, and then to actually down-regulate it.
Okay, great. Next question we have is, what is the best way to handle a 6-year-old nonverbal autistic boy to prevent him getting sexually aroused when hugging women? My son is very affectionate, and sometimes he seems to get aroused when hugging women. I don't want to make him feel rejected.
Sure.
It's an important thing to talk about.
It is absolutely an important thing to talk about, and I would think that it isn't, you know, arousal in association with women, I think, is learned. And so I don't know where he's been exposed to that, you know, and you'd have to look into that and make sure he doesn't have exposure to anything that's not appropriate for his age. But also, you might want to check his testosterone levels and see if they're high, in which case they should be modified down. And then behaviorally, I think it is just a situation where you can, you know, if he's aware of it, if he's able to understand, you will just tell him that it's not appropriate and that you will want to explain to him why, which will be difficult unless he understands theory of mind or perspective taking, because really the reason that it's inappropriate is that it, for his age, would be to say it makes the other person uncomfortable.
Right.
So it's almost like, I guess an example could be if you gave him a hug that is so strong that he feels suffocated. That would be an example of what would make him feel uncomfortable, just so he understands that it's, you know, would make the other person feel uncomfortable. And I don't know if it's just because of contact, if it's because of smell, if it's because what aspect of hugging other women evokes this.
Right.
And those are things you really have to find out. And the first thing is I would find out what his testosterone levels are.
Okay, good, important thing. And then another question that we had, good morning, question for Dr. Granpeesheh. My 5-year-old son is terrified of mannequins, which makes it a challenge to get out with the family. This issue arose just recently. We used to go lots of places where there are mannequins and he never noticed them. But now that he has become more aware of his surroundings, he has a complete screaming meltdown when he sees them or similar looking things. We've been doing outings with our current ABA provider to address the issue. There's been little improvement. We're in the process of switching to card. She has 2 boys. We're on the wait list for the Woodland Hills office. Can't wait. I'm not always able to listen to the program live, but I always listen later. I cannot thank the 2 of you enough for all that you do. I've learned so much from you both. Thank you. And then she goes on to note that she thinks that she may have seen me in a location last Sunday with Jem. And I will tell you that I can guarantee, because the location you said you did see us, I'm horrified, because on Sunday mornings I'm usually in that location having just come from the farmer's market. Say hi to me next time, but be prepared for me to be fully embarrassed.
Is this a secret location that we're not supposed to?
Yeah, I don't want to give it away. But in any case, it's usually I'm on the way to the community garden and I've gone to the farmer's market and I have mud all over me. I should not be out in public like that, but say hi next time.
That's awesome.
But it was us, I'm sure it was.
Terrific.
I hope I wasn't doing something embarrassing, or that my child wasn't, right?
Not
but
at
it's
all.
keeping it real.
There is nothing embarrassing.
There's a lot that's embarrassing.
Never.
What are you talking about? Okay, so back to her question about mannequins.
Right, mannequin. This is very, very easy. This is a systematic desensitization procedure, which ABA terminology would probably say it's more like backward shaping. You will need to do that, period. So that means right now you'll make a list. And we can do this for you once you switch over to us, but it's easy. This is not a big deal. You will, what is your child's most calming, soothing activity? You have to teach your child something that will allow him to down-regulate. So whether it's music, I don't know, maybe drawing, humming to himself. Gosh, it could be a variety of things, but meditation, breathing exercises. We do a lot of different things with our kids. You have to teach him that separately. That's phase 1, or phase 2 actually. Phase 1 is, while he's learning that, you will make a list of mannequin being the toughest thing to handle, or just like, you know, physically being in the presence of a mannequin. And then the lowest on the list would potentially be a picture of, I don't know, something that looks like a mannequin.
Okay.
And then you will gradually increase the stimuli, have at least 10 to be like, you know, so let's say below mannequin, like being right in front of a mannequin, would be being behind a glass shield where the mannequin is away from you in a glass thing, or multiple mannequins might be the most scary thing.
Yeah.
And then one down from being behind a glass shield would be, you know, they're in a glass shield and you're, let's say, on the other side of the street. You're pretty far. Another one would be watching them on TV or on a video. Another one would be, you know, so on and so forth. A picture maybe being the last one, or the easiest one. You start with the easiest one, which is the picture, and you literally have the picture in front of him, and then have him exercise that thing that makes him calm. Whether it's breathing exercises or calming or whatever, or drawing, whatever it is. Once he feels completely comfortable with that, you go to the next stimulus, and the next stimulus, and the next stimulus, and you re-expose. And you reinforce it, and you shape. And so, like, he could be exposed to the stimulus for 5 seconds, and you reinforce that, and then tomorrow for a minute, and you reinforce that, and the next day for an hour, and he's done.
Right.
And then you go to the next level, and you do the same thing. And it's a process. It'll take a little bit of time, but it's important to do.
Right.
My son was afraid of a billion different things. He's going to hate me for saying this, but the truth is he was. And I used to, like, you know, you can flood, which is very difficult, and put the child in front of that, or you can shape.
Yeah.
And I remember one week in Maui, we spent a whole week in Maui, and from the very beginning to the end of that week, all I accomplished was getting him into the ocean, actually, because he was so afraid of water at that point. So it was a process, and we had to go step by step every day a little bit closer.
And don't cut corners in the process. Take it as it comes. You'll end up in a good place. Really remarkable.
Right.
We're out of time, but I want to say also, Mike Kipple wrote in about the governor in Maine, and he said he doesn't know anyone who has a child with autism, or a family who has a child with autism, or someone who is working in this amazing occupation, which is amazing to me. And he said you should write a nice email to the governor to watch the amazing show so he can try to learn. I just want to say to Mike, thank you so much. I already contacted the governor this morning. That's what I was doing at 6:30 this morning, was sending an email off to the governor to say that I'm happy to sit and talk with him, have him on the show, off the show, happy to fill him in.
That's great.
So great minds think alike, Mike. That's why you and I are good friends. Okay, but thank you so much
It's been a
for this
pleasure.
remarkable hour. We'll look forward. We're going to be Skyping with you, it sounds like, next week.
Right.
From a distant, undisclosed location. And we're going to take a break now and watch The A Word. This is the ongoing documentary being made at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, a great example of what that early intensive behavioral intervention can do, because it follows a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2, and we're seeing how they're shaping his behavior and giving him more access to the world around him. Remember that after that's over, we're going to be doing Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson is here. She can't wait to come in and talk with you. And our special guest today, we're devoting the max that we can to the show to Dr. Andrew Levenson. And then remember, there's a special third hour after all of that with David Humphrey, who's going to be talking with us about some very important studies, autism trends in prevalence and prevention of autism. It's a very exciting talk. You're not going to want to miss it. But first, here's the A Word.
Hi, Jack Riley. Are you in the pool? Say hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne.
He said that twice. We're just getting the camera.
Hi, Suzanne.
How's everything? Everything is good. We just actually increased our hours, so that's a little overwhelming. It includes pretty much therapy from 8:30 till about 6
p.m.
6 o'clock minus his nap time. So that's challenging, but he's doing great. 6 months ago, he had 0 words. Now I don't think I can count that high. He's got so many words.
And the 25 hours, is that strictly ABA or is that ABA plus?
That's ABA plus 2 hours of speech therapy per week plus 2 hours of OT per week.
So it's almost 30 hours, 29 hours.
He works almost more than we do.
So let's say that's like as long as my work week.
Yeah, he's got a full-time job for
a 2-year-old.
A little 2-year-old with a full-time job.
Mouth. Oh, a mouth. Where does the mouth go? Oh, nice job. So he has hands, eyes, nose, and a mouth. What else does he need? Does he need ears? Oh, there's one ear. What else does he need? Shoes. Where is his shoes? He's gonna put feet. Okay. What else does he need? Oh, a hat. Which hat is he gonna put on? That one. Say hi, Suzanne. Hi, Susan. Hi, Jack Riley.
We were diagnosed November of last year, so it's been 7 months since we've known that he has autism. He started speech therapy a month later, occupational therapy probably within a few weeks of that, and then ABA we've done for 3 months, April, May, and June.
Right.
And really, I think ABA, I don't want to compare it to the others, but I mean, we've seen a huge impact on him. And
It's 20 some odd hours,
right.
compared to 2 and 4 or whatever. But yeah, he's changed dramatically since ABA started.
And it was hard in the beginning. We just even the biggest example I always come up with is they made him say his colors before he could use a marker to color, which was his thing at the time.
Do you want green or orange? Which one's orange? Green or orange? Orange, yeah. Good job.
So what's like the differences between before you started therapy and to what the kind of kid he is now?
I actually have not full days, but very large portions of partial days where I forget about autism and just think I have a 2-year-old. Specifically, he plays with us. He engages us. He's funny. He sort of makes jokes. I don't know how to explain that, but he does.
Oh, you got it.
The communication skills have increased dramatically, where we were impressed with how he could label everything under the sun
and mimic, and now he's actually asking for things. He's making requests. He wants help, and sometimes he'll say specifically, "Help open." That would have been unheard of a few months ago.
Open. Hope. What?
I don't remember this fascination with learning quite so much as the last few months.
Right.
And everything that he knows, he's always looking at us like, did you catch that I knew that? Did you see that I knew that was coming?
Are you hip to this?
Well, now it's gone. He's got it. Look at you being Mr. Trying to figure things out there. I know. That's cute. And then now it's there. Now it's there. You see it? That's hilarious. Ooh. Oh, really?
How do you differentiate or like try to figure out like what is the autism, what is his personality, what is
we don't understand at all, really, and I think really we won't understand fully unless we have a neurotypical child second. And I think as we go through stages, it'll bells will be ringing left and right. We'll be like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, actually, I still have trouble explaining it to friends or family when they ask, well, how do you know? I still have trouble explaining it. I know that we're right and that he's not misdiagnosed, but I still have trouble explaining it.
We look at each other all the time and say, is that 2 or is that autism? And I don't know that we ever answer it.
Probably our most common question to each other is Is that autism or is that 2-year-old? I don't know.
And I got both is probably what we usually say.
Yeah.
It's a little of both.
Yeah.
Papi.
What? Baby.
Papi.
Baby.
Papi.
Mommy or baby? I don't know.
Papi.
Mommy. Baby. Mommy.
Papa.
Baby. Baby.
Papa. Baby.
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 Is he a baby too?
I'm not baby.
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 How does that affect everything now that you're pregnant, waiting for sister? Were you nervous when you first found out you guys were pregnant?
Well, yeah, we thought about it. I thought I would be more nervous about it all, but as I told a woman within probably less than a week of getting Jack's diagnosis, because we were already thinking about having another baby at that time, and asked her very honestly, are we crazy? Is this just a bad time to bring in another? Is this not fair to our son? Do we need to focus on him? And she led me through a few questions, and the ultimate thing I said was, I'll take 5 more just like him. And I would, in a heartbeat. He's great. He's
Maybe not 5.
I'll take 5 more just like him.
Okay.
You're happy with just 2.
I'm happy with 2.
No, he's a happy kid. Hasn't made him any less of a treat to watch him grow up and to watch him learn. He still is doing all those things. He might be doing them on a different timetable, but we haven't missed out.
But we don't
on
know the
anything.
timetable anyway, so we're good. We're golden.
Ignorance is bliss.
He's great. He's great, and now we feel like we're on the right track. So I don't care what his timetable is. He's learning daily.
But I think that's the impression, as a parent for sure. Before you experience autism, you think of it as sort of, that everything's different.
Yeah.
And it is, but in a way, it's not at all.
Yeah.
They're still kids, and they're still fun, and
I could still see him being like king of the prom.
sure,
He's a looker, good-looking guy.
he's charmed all his therapists.
And his cinematographer. and his mom and dad. We're going to the pool. We're going to the pool. We're gonna put our swimming suits on and we're going swimming. We're going to the pool.
Yay!
We're going to the pool.
Are we there yet?
Are we there yet?
My excitement's getting stronger.
We're going to the pool. We're going to the pool.
Yay!
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod, and this is a very special day.
It is.
It's the last day of April.
It is, and you've been doing a phenomenal job on your Autism Awareness Month coverage.
Thank you.
At ACT Today, we've been doing, we've been working hard. Let's just put it that way.
You
and
certainly
my staff,
have.
my very small staff, Amy Zhang, I want to shout out to Amy in this episode because she's so amazing. We call her the Amazing Amy, in fact, and she just keeps the office really. She is the engine of ACT Today, as I say. And
we should get her a T-shirt that has, like, instead of an S, it has an A for Amy on it.
Yeah, and she just put on a little run with some help for 1,500 people and a festival, and now she's getting ready for our Hispanic conference.
Yes.
Which is coming up on May 16th, all in Spanish, and reaching out to families that need the information on early intervention, treatment, care, navigating the system. So she's putting that in motion while I'm sitting here talking with you.
Well, and I appreciate both of you because you're both remarkable women.
Thank you.
And we wanted to, we have a very special guest on the show, and we want to leave as much time for him as possible, Dr. Andrew Levenson. And he's somebody that I've never had the pleasure of meeting. I've seen recorded interviews with him, and somebody that I really respect and admire, and I can't wait to meet him. But he's somebody that you know.
I know him. I know Andrew Levenson. He did treat my child, Wyatt, at the age of 4. And I would actually credit him with being the first person to give me hope in this journey. And I mean really give me hope. He said some key words, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. I heard him in a speech at what was called a DAN conference, Defeat Autism Now. And he was the keynote keynote speaker, and Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh was the second speaker. And I called my husband and I said, I finally met two people that make sense and there's a light.
Yes.
And he did treat my son for about 4 years, and he's a brilliant doctor, psychiatrist, and they call him Yogi MD because he's a very high-ranking yogi master as well, which is very interesting, isn't it?
It is very interesting. Yeah. He has a really wonderful energy about him, too, that I think you guys are going to really love. So we're going to have him in a little while, but we did need to take a couple of minutes to talk about the things that we did since we last saw you last week.
Can I say thank you for one of the highlights of my life?
You're welcome.
Bringing me along to meet Dr. Temple Grandin.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a very emotional thing because I know what it was like when I got to interview her the first time, and Nancy is one of those people who collaborates at a level that I think most people in autism don't. Let's be honest about that. And the first time that we got to go and interview Temple, it was a very quick, arrangement thing, and we went off to do it. And I said to you, so we went and we interviewed Temple, and you were like, you did? And I went, I should have made you come with me. And I felt so bad about it. So it's been a year in the making. I needed to make that up. I needed to make that up. And so...
And, okay, Emily, can we get some... By the way, my hair was windblown when I came in, I think. There is Dr. Temple Grandin talking to me at the hotel up in Ventura. There I am interviewing her. And we have some really sweet pictures. Well, Temple doesn't really make eye contact with the camera. I mean, that's not her thing, as you can imagine, being on the autism spectrum sometimes. And it was just a great honor. And, I didn't know what to expect. And my favorite moment, and we're going to air this interview in the future.
Yes, we are.
One of my favorite moments, though, in meeting her was I handed her a rose. That rose it meant nothing to her. Yeah. She put it right down. But when I showed her some artwork that Wyatt did, she lit up.
Yeah.
She said, this is good. She goes, you must encourage this.
Yes.
You must encourage this.
Yeah.
And how old is he? Is he nonverbal?
Yeah.
Is he fully included in school? Bang, 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 the questions. Yeah. And I loved that about her.
Yeah.
And it was such an honor. I posted it all over Facebook, highlight, meeting somebody that's on one of my most admired lists.
And it was a great interview. You did a great interview.
Well,
we can't wait to show it to everybody. It was really exciting and exciting to see her in her element. And there is no artifice with her,
No, and
what she cares about, she cares about, and what she doesn't care about, she doesn't care about.
She's continued to change my perceptions, my husband's perceptions. Her book changed it. Several of her books have, but she continues to each time I come in contact with her. She's a real difference maker in the world.
She really is.
So it's just, I can't say enough good things about her. So it was a Temple weekend. We watched the movie again. We watched her DVD. I bought a new DVD. I read parts of the book again. And it really helped us connect more with Wyatt, which is the greatest blessing a parent can get.
Yeah. And Jem got to meet her, and that was a very exciting thing.
Yeah.
He was sort of like, okay, I'm going to meet Dr. Temple Grandin, and it didn't seem like he was. And we watched her TED Talk the night before.
Wyatt would not really connect with that.
Well, I will say that Jem didn't connect with a lot of it.
Okay.
He was but Temple's form of autism, and she says in the TED Talk, I am a visual thinker, but then there are the pattern thinkers, and Jem's a pattern thinker. So he found that interesting. But the rest of it, he was like, okay, are we done watching this?
Yeah.
He thought it was fun to meet her, but it wasn't like it was any big deal. But can I tell you that when he got back to school on Monday and all the kids knew that he was missing school to go meet her, they all wanted to see the pictures.
Really?
And then suddenly, I direct a play at his school every year, the Women in History, and this last year we included Temple, and so all the kids knew who Temple Grandin was.
Okay, that's how they know. I'm like, how do these kids know who Temple Grandin is? My kids are not that, in Wyatt School, are not that aware.
There is a book that's on the recommended reading list for 4th grade that is her biography, just like Helen Keller. So a lot of them have read that before I even get in there to do the show, but they wanted to see the pictures of him with her, and they were like, Jem! And he was Mr. Rockstar.
Yeah.
Yes. I talked with Dr. Grandin. This is the selfie I took with her. It was fascinating to see how he handled all of that with the kids. It was fun. But in any case, then we went from that, as if that wasn't exciting enough, Saturday morning before the crack of dawn.
The Autism Speaks walk. I think we have some pictures of us with some of our friends there. Emily, do you have any photos? I'll refer to them. Here is the booth that you brilliantly set up, you and Emily and Matt, and
Every booth has to have a craft, and so we had this long canvas, and what we did was we put paint on a kid's hands, and then we had them put their handprint.
Yeah.
It's 15 feet of lovely is what it is now.
And it basically, these kids love it. I mean, you had
such a good time.
Yeah, line kids were lining up. Oh, and there I am with Kristen Ritter. What a doll she is. She's an autism advocate, the actress. There's Max Burkholder, who we all know, who did the brilliant portrayal. And there's Holly Robinson Pete. And then I think I have me with the dashing Matt Asner.
Yes.
Anyway, we Autism Speaks. What they've accomplished in terms of awareness. And did we get a count on how many people were there?
I know that they were expecting 50,000. When I spoke to Matt on Monday, they were still figuring out what the actual total was, but I think they exceeded the 50,000.
I'm sure they did. It was a huge mass of people, and it just shows we're becoming an autism nation.
We are. And I will say this, too, that right now, even as we're speaking, there are a bunch of people that we've had on the show who have amassed themselves on the steps of the Capitol here in the state of California. I know that Matt Asner is there. I know that Ariva Martin is there. They are there.
From Autism Votes.
I don't know. Shelley was with us yesterday. I don't know if she's actually there today, but they're there for a rally. That's how they're ending this day. I want them to know that we support them in this venture. We chose to be here and to tell everybody that that's where they are. We'll give you coverage of that, hopefully, in the coming days, but we support them wholeheartedly in this rally on the steps of the Capitol. Shelley asked us yesterday for each of us to take at least 5 minutes to advocate. I've taken my 5 minutes already today.
Good for you.
At 6:30 this morning, I was emailing the governor of Maine, and I encourage all of you, find your 5 minutes today. Only 5 minutes, and then
be an activist and an advocate.
Yes, that's right.
Now make you feel better. Make you feel like you've taken positive action in the world to make it a better place for someone with autism.
And Shelley very nicely shamed me yesterday. She said, well, and I always go back to the Dr. Seuss thing, and there's that Dr. Seuss about, unless someone like you cares a whole lot, nothing's going to change. It's just not.
Right.
And I call myself an advocate, and I'm here and I talk about things, but I don't take 5 minutes religiously every day to reach out and make sure that I'm advocating on that one-to-one level, whatever that may look like. I do it here, but it's not that I'm, calling myself completely lazy, but I'm not doing enough. And I said I would make a commitment, 5 minutes, and I encourage all of you guys to as well.
That's important.
You spend a lot more than 5 minutes every day. I know you. You're a wild woman politically. And you get things done. I need to be a bit better on my game.
All right. Well, we're going to take a little break and come back with Dr. Andrew Levenson, who is one of the top biomedical doctors in the country and internationally in the field of autism. And he is joining us this morning from Miami via Skype, we hope, if we can get that connection here. And we're going to talk to him about some of his knowledge and opinions on the biomedical world and what, some basic information we feel you should know. So we'll be right back.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. We're going to be working on identifying and labeling emotions. In February of last year, I know we did something super similar, but I promise you for this project it's going to be faster and easier because part of the project you'll be printing from our Facebook page at facebook.com/autism-live. Well, here's the rest of the materials you'll be needing. Templates, scissors, crayons, and tape. The first step you're going to do is print the template from facebook.com/autism-live. I have them right here, and I printed them double-sided. So now that I have all the pages printed out, I'm going to hand it off to my kiddo to have them color it in. So while they're coloring the face, you can of course work on identifying colors, labeling features, staying in the lines, and of course working on that pincer grasp. Once your child has finished coloring all the faces, you're going to take the pieces of paper and fold them in half. Once I have all the pages folded in half, I'm going to layer them together like a booklet. Now that I have them like this, I'm going to do is take my tape inside and kind of tape it together so they're bound together. If you have a stapler, you can do that too. Alright, now that this has been taped together, it looks like I have a book. So we're almost done with the project. All we need to do now is cut along the dotted line. Keep in mind, don't go all the way across to the edge or else it's going to be cut into thirds and it's not going to be a solid book anymore. The other thing in mind is, your kid can work on following a straight line while cutting, and if they can't do that, help them out. All right, my booklet now has been cut up, and as you can see, I can now take a tab and flip it, and it'll change the look of the face. And what you can do is, ask your child how the emotion of the face changes based on what parts of the features you changed. Well, I hope you had fun doing this activity with me, and until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
We are back with Let's Talk Autism, and today we have a very special guest. Dr. Andrew Levenson is a psychiatrist. He's the founder of Vitality Health and Wellness out of Miami, Florida. He is one of the top biomedical doctors in the field of autism. Andrew Levenson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
There he is, and I have a disclosure here. Andrew, I do know him on a personal level and a professional level. Dr. Levenson treated my son Wyatt, and he was really the first person to give me hope and on this journey. And I feel he made enormous differences in Wyatt's life and in his progress. So I do want to make that disclosure and say I have a lot of gratitude for that, Dr. Levenson.
Well, and I'm thrilled that he's here because I've heard so much about, and the only time that I've ever seen you, Dr. Levenson, is in a recorded conference, and loved that, but heard so much about you from so many different people. So we're thrilled that you're here. And I want to start by saying that if you would like to get some more information about Dr. Levenson, that we encourage you to visit his website, which I have here, Vitality Wellness, and Emily's going to put it up.
She's going to put it up on the screen. There it is.
VitalityWellness.com.
Yes.
But Dr. Levenson, maybe if we can start at the very beginning and have you tell us what is the meaning of biomedical treatment?
Well, biomedical treatments are interventions that take into account all of the medical underpinnings of a problem. And in the context of something that's seemingly not medical, like a neuropsychiatric disorder, there's a clear need to establish that there are underlying causes that may trigger the problems that we're seeing that show up as a psychiatric symptom or a behavioral symptom. And that's really where functional medicine comes in, which is an approach to treating problems that involves looking at the underlying causes as opposed to just symptoms. So when we think about autism, which has a multifactorial etiology, a set of causes that comes from a variety of different places, it's a syndrome that affects multiple systems, and this is what we've known in the field for the better part of almost 2 decades. But now the white paper science is starting to show up and establish that there are serious medical complications that are sometimes undertreated, undiagnosed in children who are on the spectrum. So it's in approaching these medical problems that we often will see resolution of the behavioral symptoms, of the social problems, of the DSM-4 and 5 diagnostic criteria for autism. They start to fade away as we resolve some of these underlying biochemical, biomedical, physiological problems.
What a great explanation.
Absolutely.
And we're going to we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but you mention causality, Dr. Levenson. The increase in numbers. Can we ask you to give your opinion and expertise to this area, the causality of this epidemic?
Yeah, of course. Well, as we know, there's been a dramatic change in the amount of diagnosis of autism, and this was scoffed at for a number of years. And then, is it raining there?
No.
No, it's not raining.
I think that part of looking at why we went from a syndrome that was diagnosed in 1 in 15,000 to 1 in 20,000 children to what's now seen in, depending upon the area that you're in, up to 1 in 50 children, that something had to have happened that was outside of just a straight genetic difference. The autism that was described in the 40s is very different than the autism that's being described now. And certainly with the intensity and presence of medical.
We're having just
Emily?
a little bit of difficulty hearing you, Dr. Levenson. So I think we're going to pause, take a quick break, make sure that we adjust your levels, and then we're going to come right back.
Yeah, we'll come right back.
I'll be here.
He's fine. You're there. We got
now
you
we've
back.
got you
Okay,
back.
perfect.
Okay, so
This
let's
is
continue.
live webcast, Andrew.
So okay, we've got you back. It might just be it's incredibly windy here in Los Angeles, and that might be monkeying with the Skype. But in any case, we have you back again, so we're good. But you were just talking
about something outside of a genetic, like we can't have an epidemic. With this short a period of, I mean, you can't have an epidemic. It takes years for this to develop if it's strictly genetic, correct?
Absolutely. And, there were arguments that were made for a long period of time that doctors just couldn't diagnose this. But this is anyone who's ever had any contact with a child who's affected with autism. This is not a subtle syndrome. To imply that the smart and older pediatricians for the last 50 years have somehow missed it up until the 80s, 90s, and these aught years is preposterous. So we have a, but one of the best ways I think to think about it is that when you consider the phenotype, it's sort of the representation of the person genetically, as of an autistic individual, that they're individuals who are incredibly sensitive. In fact, their phenotype, I think, would have to be called sensitivity. And in that way, they're sensitive to everything. Our kids are sensitive to noise, they're sensitive to light, they're sensitive to chemicals, they're sensitive to medicines. And I think that this is an underlying that in society, in the societies that have passed before us, that our kids always existed, that there was always a sensitive child, maybe what would have been the child that's 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, who would have in a different tribe might have been the medicine man, might have been the tribal crone who knew which herbs to use, who knew when to plant the crops. And what's happened is that there's been some kind of environmental derailment that's taken this trait that makes our kids so special and has put them at a tremendous disadvantage. That's augmented this sensitivity, almost like a shell shock, that after this environmental insult that derails their development because of some exposure during developmentally critical time window, leaves them in a place where their sensitivity is blown out, where their sensitivity to what would have normally been an inheritable characteristic that made them special and desired, leaves them in a place where they're restricted and somewhat lost. And what that environmental derailment is, I think differs from decade to decade. I think that the original big bump in autism, this is of course my opinion, was in part due to vaccines, but not probably vaccines alone. The change in the vaccine schedule that I experienced when I was growing up in the 70s is very different than what children experienced in the amount and type of vaccines that they got in the 80s and 90s. And what goes along with that are prescribing patterns that are common at that time. So there was a big change in the 80s after the discovery of the dangers of giving aspirin to children with a fever, the movement away from aspirin to use Tylenol and acetaminophen or paracetamol. And that drug in combination with what might be an immunological overactivation due to a number of increased vaccines, combined with the detoxifying arrest that takes place when one takes acetaminophen as a pain reliever, the exposure to an inherent increase in the number of pesticides and toxins, plastics, all through the 70s and 80s. Moms in the know were drinking bottled plastic water because that was the thing to do. So all of these different toxins, the exposure, the immunological overactivation due to the combination of the vaccine schedules may have led to a synergistic effect of those toxins and a crippling of the immune system, pro-inflammation, and sort of a perfect storm, which has led to this epidemic.
Okay, this is, we have so many mothers who are on this page that have this belief, as we know. And how in the world, I have one question before we get into how you start to work with a patient. How are we ever going to know about these combinations of environmental triggers and track just which ones are injuring our children? We can't go back and do that, can we?
No, and I honestly don't think that we're going to know. I think that to the advantage of those who might have some culpability, that there's really no way to find out. And I think we have to just sort of look forward. And part of that progression may mean making really proactive choices without all of the information that you might want to be as clean, as limited in exposure to toxins and synthetics as you can, as a means of protecting yourself.
And we're going to be talking with Dave Humphrey about this very issue in the next hour.
About this very issue.
Let's move forward, though, and Dr. Levenson, how do you start to work with a patient?
Well, my approach is incredibly individualized, although there's certainly some themes that repeat themselves and approaches that I take with some children that will find their way into whether it's their brother or the kid in the next consult. I definitely feel that because our kids are so different, and they are, that there's a real need to have a very individualized treatment approach. So the one thing that the themes that are always the same is the approach in looking at sort of 5 basic components that I see in spectrum individuals, that there are problems in the area of immune dysregulation, and that immune dysregulation may look like an immune deficiency where their immune systems are just incapable of managing the defenses that are necessary. And on the other side of that, an overactive immune system where they wind up being hyperallergic or hyperresponsive to things that they maybe shouldn't. And inclusive in that window is the idea of autoimmunity, which a lot of kids on the spectrum really suffer from. So all of the things that I'm talking about involve an assessment of figuring out which of these things is problematic and challenging for them. Now, some of this comes through in a basic history, and other pieces of it have to be found through lab work and looking for biometrics that are going to identify who needs what and what's wrong with each individual. So there's the immune system that plays a big role. Another area where there's a lot of causality and problem is in the area of oxidative stress and inflammation. The idea that there are parts of the body that wind up due to free radicals or reactive oxygen species, lead to a pro-inflammatory state, which can be, in a sensitive brain, very, very debilitative. Metabolic defects, there certainly are some underlying problems with the way the body's biochemistry works in some of our kids. And supporting those weak links plays a big role in helping them to catch up. And toxicity, as I alluded to, plays a big role. There's definitely some sort of an environmental trigger that derails the train on its way towards normal development. And figuring out what these toxic sources are and detoxifying a child can play a big role. There certainly seems to be that within our population a real challenge in our kids' ability to detoxify themselves, to keep poisons from hanging on in the body. And as a result of which, clear detoxification protocols may make a difference for an individual. And the other big player is gastrointestinal health. Some kids have perfectly fine and operational guts and other kids don't. And that's where supporting healthy digestion and getting motility correct, dealing with these problems plays a big role. It used to be thought that the gut was the only thing that had to be worked on before you could get to anything else, but I don't believe that's the case. And I don't believe that dietary intervention, which sometimes gets ascribed to as a treatment for only those children who have gut problems, is the right way either, because certainly you can have no gastrointestinal symptoms to speak of, no intensive diarrhea or constipation, and yet still make tremendous strides in response to an interventional diet. So these kinds of decisions all play a role in finding out what the best path is to chart for an individual patient.
Well, and Dr. Levenson, if I can ask you, because we have a lot of different parents that watch the show, some who are a little further along, some who are newly diagnosed. And for somebody who's newly diagnosed, there's a lot to take in, right? They, you know, they're trying to figure out how they're getting their funding for ABA. They're trying to figure out what's going on with my child. A lot of times they go to the typical pediatrician who kind of poo-poos and says it's autism.
Sure.
What can you say to those newly diagnosed parents? How do they need to start to look at all these issues that you just talked about?
Well, you know, as Lao Tzu says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. So you can't be paralyzed and not move forward. Certainly there is a lot of belief in mainstream medicine that none of this has any bearing. And I absolutely don't agree with that. But a good starting point for someone who's got a child on the spectrum is quite honestly to deal with problematic symptoms first. There are some things that with your child that stand out for you. The fact that your child has unformed stools and has not had a formed stool in a couple of years is a great place to begin by dealing with gastrointestinal health. And if there's a behavioral problem where there's aggression or violence or self-injurious behavior, again, problematic places, problems are solved where they are, not someplace else most of the time.
And what about the patient who has, I'm sure you've seen a lot of these families that come to you, they've seen every specialist over a period of several years, no progress, and they maybe are even listening today and they didn't realize there were options. What advice do you have for them?
Well, you know, families who've seen lots of doctors, I tend to wind up getting a lot of patients after they have had what they experience as failures elsewhere. So it's an area that I'm very familiar with. Oftentimes, I wouldn't even say a less experienced clinician, because we're all capable of making these kinds of errors, is that, you know, we get stuck in a rut with a particular treatment. Like this happens where there is a problem, let's just say where there's a kid who's got chronic GI problems, and they've seen 3, you know, world-renowned specialists in gastrointestinal issues with autism. A lot of times, everything else, every other type of intervention gets halted while waiting for example, the gut to heal. And sometimes just the opposite of what I was saying before is that problems sometimes can be solved not at the level where they're occurring. So a problem with the gut could be dealt with by dealing with something outside of the intestinal pathway. And I think that that's important to look at things differently. And sometimes that's where a fresh set of eyes can make a big difference. Another thing that happens for families is they have a series of strange and abnormal laboratory values, and that is so overwhelming that they become paralyzed by it. So they're either being dictated by the symptoms that they have or the lab values that they have, to the extent that they either focus absolutely on those things or that they skip over them and just don't do anything as a result of it. I think that when I see families who've been around the block, that it's important to make sure that things that were considered to be treatment failures were actually true treatment failures. A lot of times in medicine, there's an attempt made to use a particular treatment, and that treatment is never fulfilled, right? Like in the realm of standard medicine or standard psychiatry, someone will make an attempt at Zoloft, and Zoloft will have only been tried at 50 milligrams, and then they move on to another medication. So even in the realm that we're in, where we're using a lot of different types of interventions, it's making sure that the interventions that have been done correctly and to the fullest extent before we consider them to be finished.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I'm wondering, for a lot of our viewers that have come to this party late, maybe their child wasn't diagnosed until they were 7 or 8, or they were diagnosed and they didn't realize that they had biomedical options. A lot of times they want to know, is it too late? Is it ever too late, Dr. Levenson, to look at these issues and get help?
I don't think that, I don't think so. That's not part of my belief system. I mean, that doesn't mean that that things absolutely will get better because you try, but if you don't try, then you're doomed to no success. I've helped a lot of families who came at a stage in the game where it would have seemed that there would be nothing to be done, that the development had happened, and that, how shall I say, the concrete had dried. But in our syndrome, I don't find that to be the case, that I've helped lots of families who came very late in the game. With adult autistic individuals, that there's changes that can happen.
Wonderful. That's great news.
And the other thing that I would just reference back to about one of the other questions is that, you know, the idea of what to do when someone has seen everybody already. The other thing that I would say is to do what hasn't been done. Oftentimes, you know, we're stuck constantly pursuing the same treatment approach, and if they've seen everybody and done what they think is everything, then probably doing what hasn't been done, if it has actually been attempted correctly, then doing what hasn't been done will produce different outcomes. As they say, insanity is the act of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Yes.
So doing something different might produce the results that you're looking for.
Amen to that.
And then we wanted to ask you about, what are your opinions on psychiatric medications in some of the more severe cases of some of the children you see, maybe with self-injurious behaviors? Or are you a proponent of using psychiatric medications in some of those cases?
The short answer would be yes. I'm not a big proponent of psychotropic meds as a knee-jerk reaction to a problem. Whether it's an adult or a child, I think that we have symptoms, even if it's depression, for example. Sometimes we feel depressed because there are things in our lives that we need to look at, which isn't to poo-poo the dangers and risks associated with a major psychiatric illness. I'm pretty well studied in this. The point I guess I'm making is that there's a time and a place for everything. So if there's a child who's very aggressive and a toddler sibling is at risk and the other alternative is an inpatient facility, then, you know, certainly we should exhaust all the options that are going to serve that family best. My personal approach is to use those things that have the lowest side effect profile first, exhaust them within good reason, and then if necessary to use psychotropic medications, which often have a higher side effect profile and bigger risks because of the intensity of their potency, for later. But I'm not against using them when the time is right, at the right dose, under the right circumstances, while they're being monitored by a professional.
I think we have to pause for a second to just remind people, if they're just tuning in, that they have the potential to be seeing you as a doctor, and if they want to know more information about you, they can go to vitalitywellness.com to find out more information. And I could guess, Dr. Levenson, that a lot of people would love to be in your office. You have a way, and I'm sure this has been said to you before in some way or another, you have a way about you that is just so soothing and gives us hope. I think it's a combination between everything that you know and just what you bring to the table personally, but it makes me feel hopeful.
Right.
Oh, thank you.
It does, and I have to say, in my family's experience with Dr. Levenson, that was a lot of what we received. He really treated the whole family. But I want to get back to a couple of things that we had questions on about some of the more controversial treatments, Dr. Levenson, which are constantly coming out. And you know, as parents, we do want to get the best for our child. So when we hear about a lot of these treatments, we are just conflicted in many ways. Should we try this? Should we not? Can we talk about just a couple of the controversial treatments, marijuana, stem cell, some of these newer things out on the market, and what your opinion is, and also you have some cautionary words about some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, unless you're a reptile, you know, there's nothing that a parent won't do for their child, right? Like, you have, there's no lack of love for your kid. And I think that one of the things that happens is that there's certainly a desire, oftentimes by very well-meaning individuals, to look for options. There are parents that spend all day at work earning the money to pay for the therapies and all night long online looking for an answer. And they're not alone. I mean, you know, if you could pull back the lens, there are tens of thousands of moms and dads with red eyes staring at a computer screen, you know, praying for something to do. And there are lots of options that are out there that are being marketed. And just like anything that's in the marketplace, there's a certain amount of buyer beware. Now, this cuts both ways, right? Like that argument is used to convince parents that they shouldn't be taken advantage of, that they should only use an approved medication, that they should only do what's been done. They should wait until it's been proven to be safe or effective. But of course, as you know, if you're the parent of an affected child, time is not your friend. And, you know, you only have, certainly we can help older kids, but there's an accessibility to dealing with and addressing a child before development is completed that you want to get on the bandwagon as quickly as you can. So you can't wait. And yet you don't want to be, you don't want to have advantage taken of you. And at the same time, you don't want to do something that's going to put your child more at risk. And you don't want to lay ruin to your limited financial resources because, you know, let's face it, the state, the government, our bank accounts can't manage all the therapy that a significantly affected child needs. So sometimes there's some real benefit to taking a pause and not being the first one in, to letting there be a little bit of time to pass to see how it's working. And one of the areas where I think that's most poignant is maybe stem cell therapy. There's a lot of inconsistency to the type of stem cell work that's being done. It's still very nascent. It's new. We don't know who it's going to work for. We don't know all of the markers for what makes a good responder versus a bad responder. I have patients who've come to my practice who've done stem cell who felt that it was an amazing experience for them. And I've had patients who come to my practice who feel like their child who had made great gains already and they went to stem cells to go the final stretch, that they lost an enormous amount of their gains. And it's and there's no, I can't say there's no rhyme or reason. There's no rhyme or reason that I can attend to, that I can say that it's this or it's that. So and by the way, in the bulk of people who've had their experience with stem cell feel that it's pretty neutral, which with the costs that are involved, that's a hard decision to make. But I know people on all sides of that aisle. And I think that that's where making a cogent choice about what's going to be reasonable for your family. Do you have $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 that you can lay on the line? Not that, would you, right? Like that comment comes through all the time. Like, there's nothing I wouldn't do for my child, but you have to triage. You still have to pay the mortgage. Yeah. So it's hard with those kinds of interventions, and we get them all the time. Having been in this for the better part of 2 decades, I've seen a lot of therapies come and go. Some of them inexpensive, seemingly benign therapies that were marketed on the internet, and those companies are out of business or have been rebought by another company because of the claims that they made, which were untrue, and some of them unsafe. And there are other things that, you know, have, I think, and that's a reasonable likelihood of helping, which is why I recommend them. And that's part of the reason to find someone that you feel can do the work for you and with you to help you find a safe path. You know, I use this this idea a lot that, you know, the work that I do with parents and families is very collaborative, but you know, you can't get to the summit of Everest without a Sherpa. So you need someone who knows the tracks, the path, the safe parts, the crevasses, where it's going to be okay to climb and where it isn't. And that's where it's about finding someone that you can trust. Unfortunately, it's not an easy thing to do all by yourself.
So you're our Sherpa.
You're our Sherpa.
And I just have a question that I want to cycle back to, because I'm sure that there are people who are watching who would be interested in meeting with you and talking about treating their child. So, but help us to understand, because the people all over the world, where are you located and who can you help and how can people access that if they're not where you are?
Yeah, well, I'm in Miami, Florida. I'm licensed in New York and California, state-wise. I do telemedicine, or I work by phone with families all over the world to support them in working with their doctors wherever they have them. I'm a collaborative person, and I want to just share what I know to help people get as far down the path as they can to help their kids.
Yes. In our case, our family worked with Dr. Levenson in the very beginning. We took Wyatt to Miami a few times to see him, and then we continued with teleconference for about 4 years.
Okay.
So that worked for us quite well.
Okay, and so I forgive my ignorance with telehealth, but do you have to actually physically see the child once before you can do the teleconferencing?
I prefer to. It depends on what's taking place. So for prescription of medications, of medicinals, then yes, technically that's what's required.
Okay.
To be consultative, telemedicine and e-medicine has seemingly become available without restriction. There are some states that are very proprietary about who provides medical care to their patients. So there are some states that it's more flexible for, and other states that it isn't.
Okay, because I think there are going to be a lot of people who are going to want to see you. And I want to get back, give them that information. So again, vitalitywellness.com for more information about that.
And how much time do we have here?
We literally are down to, we've got about 4.5 minutes left.
Okay, let's ask this question about parents that might be considering having another baby or having their first one, or they're currently pregnant with a newborn. Are there actual precautions they can take to lessen the chances of having a child with autism?
Proven? No. I don't think that there's, they haven't done any kind of standardized double-blind studies to look at where the risks are and where they aren't, although certainly there are some studies that point in certain directions, and there are some flaws in some of those studies as well. I think that for me, in the work that I do when I counsel families who are sort of prenatal counseling for families around the issue of developmental delay, there are certain things that you can do. There are vitamins and nutrients that you need to keep at a higher level. There have been some studies that have shown that, and there's a lot of crossover from learning disabilities like attention deficit and autism, but children with a lower level, moms with a lower level of vitamin D, for example, during pregnancy have an increased risk of having kids with attention difficulties.
And folic acid, Dr. Levenson?
Absolutely, and there are some genetic markers that may point towards who's more at risk and who's less at risk. And a lot of that goes hand in hand with decreasing toxic potential, and in my preference to detoxifying before pregnancy, because there's a lot of work that can be done before you actually conceive, which is really critical.
Okay. And I'm gonna end with this because it's almost time. I think it'll be the last question. You once said to me, worry. I said, I'm just so worried. And you said to me, Nancy, worry is a form of negative prayer.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. Can you just comment on that?
Well, I learned that from my yoga master, Yogi Bhajan, a long time ago. He used to say that worrying is praying for things that you don't want. And if you think about what meditation is, it's a type of concentrated intent towards where you're going and what you want. And if you spend your time worrying, you're just generating that field around yourself, which is kind of magnetic for a certain type of bad mojo. So it's hard to put your finger on it, but I don't think that there's a lot to be gained by worrying. There's a difference between, being discerning and being proactive. There's an old saying, trust in Allah, but tie your camel. So, you can do your best to prepare and have faith at the same time.
All right. Well, those are beautiful words. We'd like to have you back sometime. Are you up for that?
Sure.
Okay, because we'd like to get more in depth into some of these issues.
Yeah.
So once again, we've been speaking with Dr. Andrew Levenson out of Miami, Florida.
Thank you so much for all this information.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm sure we're going to have questions, so we'll follow up with you, and we're going to have you back on very soon. Thank you, Dr. Levenson.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Remarkable to hear him speak. He has such a wonderful positive energy, such a calming influence.
You can see why when I heard him And then when I heard he was in Miami, and I went right up to him, and he goes, I treat children all over the world.
Yeah.
And I just made up my mind right then and there. And that was the same day I met Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh. It took us a little longer to get the card in the ABA. You know, most of you know most of my journey, that Wyatt was diagnosed late, misdiagnosed, and then finally when he was diagnosed, he was 4. But we did get on that train, every train, right away. And my son has been helped so much by these professionals, and my heart is just so full of gratitude for the Dr. Dorene Granpeeshehs and the Dr. Andrew Levensons of the world.
Remarkable, remarkable people. It's been an exciting 2 hours already, but we're not done yet.
No.
We have another hour that's upcoming. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to be back with David Humphrey. He is the CEO of Kirkman Labs, and he actually is going to be talking with us, excuse me, about a couple of studies, one in particular that is going to be published in Pediatrics Magazine, and I believe it's in 3 different segments, a study that Dr. Granpeesheh is actually involved in. Okay. And we're going to find out some of the questions that we were talking to Dr. Levenson. We're going to overlap a little bit about prevention.
Yes, and this idea of environmental toxicity, and what we can do as mothers, being proactive for our children, being proactive in every way. So.
And for those who are thinking of having another child, I think this is a conversation that you're not going to want to miss. So stick with us. We're going to be right back after these messages.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting 2 battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and then they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle, and without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta, and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate,
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get 2 kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear Act Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. You know, we underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community.
The Institute for Behavioral Training provides courses in applied behavior analysis for the treatment of autism. Access IBT e-learning videos on the move and learn at your own pace.
I'm going to talk a little bit about intensity.
IBT e-learning makes any location your classroom on the go.
So our objectives for today are to really learn what is autism and how is it diagnosed.
Get professional guidance with IBT face-to-face training. IBT face-to-face training courses prepare you to effectively implement ABA-based interventions. Choose between small group and one-to-one instruction. Earn BCBA supervision hours via one-to-one video conferencing.
So I had a chance to review your BIP today. You know what? It looked really good. You did a good job with it.
IBT continuing education courses. Earn credit through webinars, conferences, article reviews, and e-learning videos. You can learn more at ibehavioraltraining.com. IBT, 360 degrees of ABA training.
Welcome back to this really incredibly special day here on Autism Live. If you're thinking, wow, I thought they were done for the day, this is a special day. April 30th, it's
We're
the last.
never done, Shannon.
We're never done.
Never done.
They're going to be putting us in the casket, and you are going to be saying one more thing. About autism. But in any case, we wanted to do something extra special on this last day of April. We wanted to end it on a bang. And I feel like in the first hour, we asked Dr. Granpeesheh what she wanted to do. In the second hour, you said that you wanted to have a conversation with Dr. Levenson.
Yes, Dr. Andrew Levenson just had a fascinating conversation with us about biomedical interventions, which I think
remarkable.
Yeah, really. And also just his attitude about the journey of autism is so hopeful.
It is, absolutely. And so in the third hour, it was put to me about what do I want to hear more of, what would I like to hear more of. And so I asked David Humphrey if he would come and be with us, because out of all the things, we really wanted to be talking about autism trends, what's hot, what's new, what's the information that's cutting edge that we'd like to get out to people. And out of all the interviews that we have done in the last year, the one that really knocked my socks off and made me rethink everything more than any other was when we talked to David Humphrey. So, and imagine, that's saying a lot, because we've interviewed some really incredible people in the last year. But David Humphrey is joining us right now via Skype. He is the CEO of Kirkman Labs, the most respected entity that does supplements and different biomedical things that you should all be nutritional supplements. Incredible, the trusted name in the field. Very targeted.
Used in a lot of the biomedical interventions that a lot of our specialists
Anytime you go to a conference, you're going to see Kirkman Labs at a table there. Stop by and talk to them. It's amazing what they do, and there are so many things that we could have had David on the show and talking about today. But I want you to know that we've asked him to talk very specifically about a certain area, and that's in dealing with prediction and prevention. And I know that's like some really interesting ground to walk on. When you say prevention of autism, people go, what? What are you talking about? But I find this, just the beginnings of this discussion to be fascinating. So
let's say hi to him.
Well, let's say hi, and let's give him an opportunity. But David, are you there?
I'm here.
So I'm thrilled, and we're going to turn this over to you and let you give us lots of information. But I want to say before we turn it over to you that at the end of this hour, we're going to leave time at 1:45. We're going to take questions from viewers and from Nancy and I. But until then, we're going to go on radio silence and let you have the floor. But first of all, welcome. And we're so excited. I don't know if you heard what I was saying, but out of everybody, you were the person that I wanted to hear from again.
Oh, well, thank you. No, it's a great program that you have, and it's really an honor to be here. So,
well, it's our thrill. So without further ado, David's going to be talking with us about autism trends, prediction, and prevention. David, take it away.
This weekend, I listened on audiobooks to a book called Understanding Autism by Chloe Silverman. Chloe Silverman's a PhD from Princeton. She's hung out with Martha Herbert for the last 7 or 8 years, talked to a whole bunch of parents, and she wrote a really great history of the autism. She talked about the turning point in autism was the era of Dr. Rimland, where Dr. Rimland basically said, nonsense of the refrigerator mother. He also talked about a parent-driven movement, and he talked about the fact that love and loving children is the way we're going to get out of this mess. So I was fortunate over the years to be Bernie's personal attorney. I volunteered. It was free. But I got a chance to talk to him once a week, and we became friends. And when he was in hospice, he came out of hospice one more time to draft a sort of a manifesto of where he saw autism was going. And we spent 3 hours together, and it was an incredible discussion. He was absolutely the brightest, shiniest light in terms of where the future should be. And one of the things that Bernie saw is the development of the potential of both predicting and preventing autism. And it was interesting, in Chloe Silverman's last chapter to her book, it's exactly where she went. And she said, this is likely going to be something that may define the future. What may also define the future, though, is the darker elements. And that is, there's a lot of movement right now, the geneticists, to go ahead and use the information on the cluster of genes to abort these precious children in the womb, which is unbelievably crazy. But just like in Down syndrome, where the Down syndrome community raised money to make deliveries safer, only to find out that the genetic information was used to abort children. 94% of all Down syndrome kids are aborted. So what I'd like to talk today is the development of what's happened since Bernie's death, and that is my work in the last 4 years at a couple of foundations, the Northwest Autism Foundation and the Forum, which is a think tank, on how do we develop a comprehensive global policy on predicting autism and then preventing it once we can predict it. So let me go ahead and start with where are we heading with autism? We've got the current rates of 1 in 68. What are the costs? What does the future look like? What's the history, really, of the foundations I've been working with in the think tanks? Have we solved previous problems? Have we done previous things to affect the future? And can we solve this mess that we're in? It's obviously a mess. I'm not going to focus on the area that is defining the foundation I'm with, which is lifespan, which is there is work to be done in each of the areas, whether it's early diagnosis, behavior treatment, education, training, housing, providing parent education, coaching, medical homes, services, and community sensitivities. So we have a total program we're looking at, and each one require developing a comprehensive solution. But for today, I'm going to talk about the first step. How do we go ahead and shut off the valve? Or as some scholars talk about, swimming upstream and figuring out who's dumping all these kids in the water. So the rates, we know that the current rates done by the CDC, which almost everybody here is seeing, is 1 in 68. But it's important to note that 1 in 68 over the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years in accurate counting, represents a 15% increase a year. If the 1 in 68 represent 10-year-olds, that's how long it takes to count everybody and make sure the diagnoses are in, which is a whole separate radio program on itself. But the 1 in 68 does represent 10-year-olds. So we do the math and say, what is the risk of a newborn becoming autistic? How can we predict it? We just take 68, we take a 10-year trajectory of statistics and at 15%, and we come up with a current rate of children born today of a risk of developing autism are 1 in 18. I just talked to a good friend of mine who's involved with the California Centers of Excellence at 21 centers in California where they count 3-year-olds. And he said they just got done getting one of their regional counts. Schizophrenia was 14 kids, mental retardation was 23, autism was 500. And this is a sharp increase. These numbers are real. And as he mentioned, it is going to completely overwhelm the system's ability. That's why the prevention part is so important, is for those of you out there that do have children, and the many families that I know, there's not going to be money for adequate services when you have this incredible number of individuals coming in the system vying for the dollars and services. And behind the statistics, obviously, are stories. And I've been privileged over the last 15 years owning Kirkman, getting thousands and thousands of stories that we've seen. And of course, working with Dr. Rimland for 25 years. And probably the most dramatic is that I remember going down the first time I met with Dr. Rimland, and it was at noontime. I was a big shot. I was an attorney, and I was just getting into this. And so I was going to see the big man. And he was on the telephone for an hour and a half. And I thought, well, that must be something like the New York Times or some big deal, because he kept me waiting, right? And he hung up the telephone, and he said, let's go to lunch. And I said, well, Dr. Rimland, who's that? And he said, it was a parent. And I said, oh, somebody that you're working with? No, just met him. But they had a child just diagnosed with autism and needed help. And I understood at that moment that for Bernie, it was about one child. You know, for Bernie, it was about one family. And when he got done at work at 10 o'clock at night, he watched the news. But then he came back to his office at 11 o'clock so he could get calls from people all over the world. And I understood something, and it changed me. And I do understand this is about one child, the importance of one child. We have made tremendous efforts in terms of the medical condition. I just saw in pediatrics yesterday, they just published a meta-study showing that children with autism have significantly more gastro issues than the average child, and that this is part of the condition. And we would like to think that we had a hand in establishing that. So let's go back in terms of the foundation. When I discussed where we were going with Dr. Rimland, he said, look, we have a lot of great doctors out there, a lot of great parents, but we need to be able to get the academic and government community to buy into the medical conditions. So Bernie helped us raise money, and we funded $500,000 in gastro work at Harvard with Tim Bowie and Dr. Kozak saying absolutely that these kids had a unique form of gut disease. We then set out a goal of raising $6 million to form the Autism Treatment Network. And the person that we headed the project was Jim Perrin, Dr. Perrin. It ended up getting $70 million when it was over to Autism Speaks. And Dr. Perrin now is the president.
1 minute.
President of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And they basically published a lot of the work about the medical conditions. So we also did a consensus study that was published in Pediatrics. It involved 26 of the best gastroenterologists in 2010. It was an 83-page insert, and it exists, and if you look it up, you'll see that it absolutely demonstrates that children with autism, as part of the condition, 50% have gastrointestinal complications that need treatment. So the question is, what's causing autism? What's causing the medical problems? Stanford really caused the world to change when 3 years ago they published a study based on twins, and they said that this is not coming from a genetic only cause. In fact, they said it looks like about 65 to 70% of the cause of autism occurs in the womb because of toxicity. Since then, people like Phil Landrigan from Mount Sinai has actually worked with Dr. Peshoff of the Mind Institute, and they're identifying the specific compounds which are causing autism in the womb. It's lead, methylmercury, organophosphates, organopesticides, endocrine disruptors, automotive exhaust, perfluorinated compounds. And these are shown to be uniquely damaging during the second trimester, and that is the critical time of formation. So based on this information, that we have an absolute epidemic occurring, and the cost of a rate of 1 in 20 for autism based at $3 million a child exceeds the entire cost of Medicare. The entire cost of Medicare, including all of the payments to seniors. It's about $600 billion a year. So what we need to do is take a look at where can we go. So we're going to be publishing a study that's taken us 2.5 years to do. It's with 26 individuals, including Dorene Granpeesheh from CARD, who many of you heard earlier, who's an unbelievable contributor to solutions with autism. But Margaret Bowman from the Ladders program in Harvard led the project. Dorene and others were participants and major participants. And here's what we said. We started with the hypotheses. Is autism predictable? Is it predictable before regression? And if it is predictable, can it be prevented? So here's the conclusion, and again, the study is embargoed, and it will be published over 3 issues of Pediatrics, 25 pages each, so it's a major part of the pediatric publications. But here's basically what we're saying. The consensus of the group is, by the age of 1, microgestures can be studied and observed with 1-year-olds that can give us a predictability that that child will likely become autistic to 2.5. And these are microgestures, and part of the studies that were done is that there were so many parents took 1-year-old videos of birthday parties. And with those 1-year-old videos, they were able to have researchers detect microgestures, and they blinded the researchers, and they were accurate 50% of the time, but also 95% of all the autistic children that became autistic, they got in the pool. So some of the children that didn't become autistic had other abnormalities. The preventability was important to us, because if you predict something and then there's nothing to do about it, it becomes almost mean-spirited to say your child will develop autism and there's nothing to do about it. We've all heard that story before in terms of treatment. Well, the preventability is actually really good news. It's called the Early Start Denver Model Program. It was done by Dr. Dawson and Dr. Sally Rogers. And what it is a modified form of ABA intervention. And with that intervention, that many of these children can, at the age of 2.5, develop no signs of autism. And here is the really fascinating hypothesis. Dr. Granpeesheh actually did
We're back here in the studio, Nancy and I. We're
27.
sitting here, and
The average.
We have him back.
There's David. David, we lost you for just a minute, and so I interrupted for just a second. I want you to go back. You were talking about the Denver model and talking about how Dr. Granpeesheh is involved in this, and you froze for just a minute. So I'm going to ask you just to go back to that point. We're turning it back over to you.
Okay. The Early Start Denver Model Program is the model for intervention. And Dr. Granpeesheh is an expert in this area, and she's going to help us develop the model for the prevention. But basically, what it does is it strengthens the middle cortex of the brain so that it adjusts for the defects in the frontal lobal cortex area. Plus, it has a way of changing circuitry of the brain. And here is the cool thing, and that is with Dr. Granpeesheh did an informal study of 35 high-risk children, 1-year-olds, that had probably a 50-50 chance of developing autism. And by the age of 4, there was no autism that was seen, but their average IQ was 127. And this is very, very significant, because it could well be that the autism genes are not regressive genes, but merely an evolutionary gene pool that is adapting to a more complex world, and that the problem is that with toxicity in the womb, it affects the frontal lobal area, which is being damaged. And if that is the case, it is a travesty to abort these children. their average IQ is 127. We don't see clusters of genes developing that are regressive genes that are creating more intelligence. So does this have any published validity as well? Well, yes. Dr. Dawson did a study of these baby sibs at 1. It was a very well-controlled study published in Pediatrics, and she got an 18-point bump in IQ with this early Denver START program starting at the age of 1. One of the reasons it's really critical at the age of 1 rather than the age of 5 or 6, the brain has a lot of plasticity at the age of 1. So, for example, if you're in Iceland and you're a 1-year-old, you can learn the language of Icelandic in about 8 months, where if you're somebody like me at the age of 65, it would be impossible to learn, or I just get a little bit of it in 5 years. So we have a brain that has the capacity to be recircuited, rewired, and relearned, and that's exactly what this.
We're going to take a short break while we check our connection with. He's back, but let's take a short break so we can correct this problem.
Okay.
And then we're going to be right back. So watch this message.
Hi, welcome to Camp Discovery, a free-to-play suite of fun, interactive learning games for kids 2 and up, designed by experts in autism. Camp Discovery will open your early learner to a world of new skills, shapes, numbers, colors, locations, emotions, and more. Let's get started.
Please choose a level.
Objects. First, Camp Discovery's Intelligent Preference Assessment determines your child's preferred reward for choosing correctly. Okay, got it. Let's play. Camp Discovery creates a motivating learning environment for your child by minimizing incorrect responses and maximizing successful ones.
Find the shoes.
Respond correctly and your child is rewarded with their favorite animations.
You did it.
Respond incorrectly and our unique prompting system guides your child to the correct answer by making it the largest choice.
That's not it. Try again. Way to go.
Continue to answer correctly and the size gradually reduces until the child makes the correct choice independently.
You win.
Success! Rewards motivate learning. Complete a round and your child is rewarded with a fun mini-game. Track your child's progress with easy-to-read graphs. Multiple settings options allow you to customize Camp Discovery to your child's unique needs. All this in one single app, the Camp Discovery app, available for free on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon Store.
Welcome back to this special edition of Autism Live. I'm here with Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson, and we have with us via Skype David Humphreys. He's giving us a very interesting talk today. Both you and I are listening and nodding.
We're listening, and he's got such a breadth of knowledge about autism and biomedical treatment and nutritional and vitamin therapy, and he's been filling us in on the latest research on things such as causation and prevention and the Denver model. And we're going to let him continue where he left off when we had a Skype issue.
Yes.
But David, if you could pick up again on the Denver model and how you were seeing the signs of autism and that you could, in fact, identify this with children as early as 1 year and take it from there.
Okay, well, I apologize for whatever technical problems, but this is actually really important information. And the fact that Pediatrics is going to have this published in 3 editions and a major insert, 25 pages each, and it's a consensus of 26 of our brightest people, that the hypothesis is that we can predict autism at 1 with microgestures, just like the 7 warning signs of cancer. And once predicted, the Early Start Denver model program is the answer to how to address it and how to prevent autism by the age of 2.5. And as I mentioned before in Chloe Stevenson's book that she just finished, her last chapter is saying the early identification at 1 and the intervention is the best hope we have. And I completely agree with it. It's been my life. So what we're looking at now is the implementation of this program. We also had a really interesting study that just got published in the New England Journal of Medicine, our most prestigious journal, dealing with results of 12 children who died with autism and had their brains autopsied by the researchers. And here's what they found, very consistent with what we're talking about. They found that the damage done to the brain was in the second trimester, which indicates not a genetic but an environmental insult to those genes. The second thing they found is the circuitry problems occurred in the frontal lobal cortex area, and it was not as serious, and they suggested that that had an opportunity of being repaired. The other thing that they noticed is that the damage needs to be repaired during this plasticity period of time from 1 to 2.5, when the brain has an amazing job of doing recircuitry. So even though it was only 12 studies of brains, and it sounds a little bit ghoulish, but this was the first time that they had done this with the brains of children. And it gives us a tremendous amount of confidence that what we're looking at publishing is consistent now with the hard science. So the next subject is, it's more than just autism. And this is a project we're doing at the forum called P2I, or preconception to infancy. What we're looking at doing is we're looking at creating a program that we're finishing that takes how do we go ahead and protect a woman before conception, preconception, and then through the first 2 years of infancy. So not only can reduce the incidences of autism, but also reduce the incidences of other chronic diseases. What we've seen in the literature is the number of all conditions with children are increasing at an alarming rate. And the types of diseases we saw for the first 50 years from 1950 to 1980, these are all going down. Tuberculosis, mumps, rheumatic fever, these are the episodal problems. But the chronic conditions done with inflammation problems and autoimmune diseases, which are autism, ADHD, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, diabetes, asthma, and cancer, are all going up. Cancer is a leading death of all children under the age of 7. This is caused by environmental damage in the womb. So what are the numbers right now? The numbers are really shocking overall. And that is the miscarriage rate in this country right now is 31%. That's right from the New England Journal of Medicine, 31%. Preterm births are at 12%. And by the age of 5, 40% of all of the children will have a chronic condition that will last them a lifetime, whether it be autism, asthma, allergic eczema, serious food allergies, celiac disease, ADHD, dyspraxia, bipolar conditions. And these conditions are being caused by problems that occur with toxicity in the womb and toxicity during the first 2 years of childhood. So these are serious problems. We talk about preterm. It's 12%. It lowers IQ by 8 points. It's a $26 billion a year problem. 10 times the learning disorders, 8 times the cerebral palsy. And let's just look at one of these effects during pregnancy. A Danish study that was very persuasive, done with close to 60,000 women, shows that for every can of Diet Coke with aspartame, a woman increases her chance by 18% of having a preterm child. Well, who knows that? Who knew that aspartame could create that much of a difference? Now, was this replicated with 5 or 6 more studies? No. This was an extremely well-done study and should be enough to cause people to be concerned about what things are affecting baby. So if we take a look at the evidence behind toxicity in the womb, a lot of it came from the Environmental Working Group, where for the first time 3 years ago, they took core blood from baby and they matched that up to the pesticide and toxicity loads of mothers. They expected that they would see that almost all these toxins were being filtered out during the pregnancy period by the protection in the womb. What they found was shocking. What they found was none of it was being filtered out. These chemicals and heavy metals were getting through to baby as if the mother was smoking cigarettes nonstop. And it caused such concern that the CDC replicated the study, and they published a full issue of Pediatrics April of 2011, detailing the pollution in the womb, creating unbelievable problems with neurological issues and chronic illness. We have found the smoking gun. That smoking gun now needs to be brought to the public's attention. So what are we looking at if it's done right? Fortunately, in our autism community, we have several doctors that when parents have gone to them and said, look, Dr. Berger or Dr. Traver, we'd like to have a second child. Can you reduce our chances of that child having autism? The techniques they've developed were organic foods, no toxicity, breastfeeding, and those protocols that are developed have had dramatic effects on the outcome of children. Dr. Berger is one that we've been patterning our program after. Dr. Berger is quite famous. He's in Tampa. What's not known is he's also a pediatrician. He's had 500 pregnancies under his practice. Of those 500 pregnancies, almost no miscarriages, almost no preterm babies. He's had one child with mild autism and one child with eczema out of 500 children. And we've seen this pattern develop with 4 or 5 other doctors. Dr. Rimland told me to take a look at a study done in 1990 at the Foresight study in England. And it was 367 couples that had enormous problems with other children. They had miscarriage rates of 38%, preterm rates of 17%, and they embarked upon a toxic-free, no chemicals, organic food, and with babies breastfed for the first year and a half. And of the 327 couples that got pregnant, here's the results. They had 0 miscarriages, 0 stillbirths, 1 child underweight, no malformations, and not a single child developed any chronic childhood diseases. They didn't know at the time what was causing it. We do now. So what we've done is we've collected some of the best scientists on the planet. Dr. Carol Wagner, a neonatalist out of South Carolina, Dr. Robert Heaney, who is probably the leading nutrition publicist out of Creighton University. He heads that program. And Dr. Cedric Garland, an epidemiologist out of UCLA. That's the team we're putting together to put together a very interesting public campaign to reach 1 million families having children, and also implement the Early Start 1-year program. So part of what we're going to do is, if we're going to have something that's revolutionary, we have to have a technology that's revolutionary. And this is the most exciting part of this talk, is what we're developing with a very interesting format on the internet. There's a company that has developed a virtual environment that is almost the same if you were going to go to an autism conference. You can listen to CME courses. It looks like live technology. It's able to be done on the internet, but it's almost like you're going to a real conference. You can take CME courses, you go to forums, and as you're talking in English, people in Turkey can hear you in Turkish. This is unbelievably interesting technology. Every parent will have a workbook. The Early Start Denver program will be completely described on the site. The warning signs of the 1-year-old will be described. And we can have up to 100,000 people a day on this website. It's a very expensive project to create, and we're raising the money in our foundation. And we're going to go ahead and break this program sometime in November. But I can't exaggerate the importance of having a global discussion on 2 areas. Number 1 is how to recognize and prevent autism and have that available for every single family, regardless of their financial circumstances. And the second one, P2I, is being able to give instructions for parents of how to avoid toxicity and what kinds of foods bother the fetus, how to avoid problems with all chronic illness, and have healthy children that have the ability to thrive and be able to cut down the rates of all of the chronic illnesses that are costing this country $500 billion. As a young attorney, I worked for Ralph Nader. I was an environmental attorney back going to law school, formed the first PIRGs, and we saw the assault to the environment is where the problem was. The assault to our streams and our rivers and the air we breathed. What I now understand, and what we didn't see then, is these minute amounts of chemicals and toxicity and lead and mercury are causing enormous problems for the developing fetus and new children. We bring children home from the nursery and we put them on a brand new crib that's been sprayed with arsenic from the factory. 200,000 mattresses were recalled by the factory because somebody put too much arsenic on them. We paint with paint in the baby's room, and then we put new carpeting down. John Green, a doctor out of Portland, told me he's run an experiment of taking an aquarium with no water in it, putting a brand new piece of carpeting, and putting 2 mice, and they'll be dead in the morning from the fumes of the carpeting. These are the carpets the babies are going on. We have to have a wake-up call. This new technology will allow us to be able to communicate globally with everyone, get the information out. We're recruiting some of the best people for CME courses, some of the best people for TED presentations, and people will have access to this information, be completely free. This inspiration and this direction on where this is coming from is absolutely Dr. Rimland.
Welcome back. We have unfortunately lost David, but we're going to get him back. We're getting close to the point where we're going to start taking questions. So you guys can be sending those in to us on the live feature right now. I know I've got my list of questions. There he is. But we're going to take a break. David, can you hear us? We lost you again for a second. You were just referencing Dr. Rimland, and then we lost you. Do you want to pick it up there, or should we take a break?
Sure. No, I'll go ahead.
Okay, go right ahead.
What I want to say is I've been fortunate being part of the great man's life.
Unfortunately, we're not seeing you, though, David.
Yeah, we're not seeing you.
We're going to take a short break just to fix what's happening technically, because this is all so important, what you're talking about. We want to make sure that the audience can see you.
We'll pick it up about being a part of the great man's life.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Autism Live after this message.
What is autism? What is autism?
What is autism?
What is autism?
What is autism?
What is autism?
I've been asking myself that for a very, very long time.
Let me think about that one.
Trying to just
Jeez. Let me think. Oh man, that's a rough one. Yes.
Autism.
Autism is a neurological disorder that affects many of our kids in different ways.
It's a learning disability that affects the cognitive functions of the brain.
A lot of people have the misconception that it's a disability, and it's really not.
I look at it as like a special gift.
When one person thinks differently from another.
It's an opportunity for everyone to learn to understand someone that's a little different than them. Autism is the ability to educate.
They're given so much talent in different areas.
To me, autism means a chance to be with and be around people you really care about. Autism is beautiful.
It's a way of seeing the world differently.
It's always unique, totally intelligent, and sometimes mysterious.
Happiness that comes out of my son's hard work.
is a movement.
Unpredictable.
That's right.
Awesome. Love. The field I want to work in. Laughter, fun, joy. Autism is beautiful to me.
I want you to remember these 3 words. There is hope.
Welcome back to Autism Live, this very special edition on the last day of April. We have with us via Skype David Humphrey, and we had just a little bit of technical difficulty, and we wanted to pause so that you could hear him. David was talking about Dr. Bernie Rimland and what it was like to be a part of his life, and we want to give him the opportunity to finish that thought. So, David, go ahead.
All right. I do want to say that I may be a pretty good lamp, but I'm not the electricity. The electricity that runs through me really is the life and work of Dr. Rimland, the direction that he gave me and the insights he gave me on where we need to go. And we are right at the start of being able to have an incredible solution to a problem and provide a lot more services for families that have existing children. I also want to state that I'm so grateful I've been part of a foundation with Gleason Aiken and Wayne Hammersley and John Mahoney and others that have been dedicated for 13 years to following, without any politics involved, how can we bring solutions that took a lot of time and a lot of money to accomplish. So I think what we have is we have a foundation of moving forward. This technology that I'm describing, when people see it, they're going to be so thrilled. The campus is a beautiful, gorgeous virtual campus. There's a monorail that you can take and go around and see all the different buildings. But then you can go in and listen to hours and hours of CME courses, of lectures, of TED presentations, and all the science will be kept up to date. And you'll be able to go to forums and talk to people around the world in languages that they'll be able to translate and understand. And we'll be able to go ahead and be inspired by numbers and figures of successes we have. And we will build a lifespan inside of, eventually, which will be an autism campus, which will then go ahead and house these things. We are dedicated to doing this. We're dedicated to making it free for everybody, regardless of their ability to pay. And then what we need to do is get a whole bunch more doctors, providers, and healthcare people certified. But here's the cool thing. There'll be a doctor building on campus. So doctors and healthcare professionals, you could take the same CME course as the doctor. And when you find the doctor in your location, they'll be in the doctor building, and you can go ahead and locate them and make sure they know what you know. The biggest problem I hear now is people go to a doctor and the doctor won't even listen to what their experiences are and what their internet searches are. This way we have a true global discussion and a chance to go ahead and solve this for really the millions and millions of children affected worldwide. So again, I'm really pleased to make these announcements. It will be a reality. It will launch in December, and we think we can bring the community together with it. So thanks so much. I know there's been a lot of complex information, but the thing I love about this community is I knew right away that I'm dealing with really bright parents, and I completely love and trust their ability. As long as I'm transparent, they seem to get stuff very quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right, David, that there's so many parents, and we have to become scientists and attorneys and advocates, and never underestimate an autism parent when it comes to finding out information to help their children. And you've just given us so much food for thought on prevention and causation and things that we can do and predictability. Shannon, do we have some questions?
Yeah.
You had some, and we have some that
absolutely that have come in on the live.
Okay.
And I knew that this question was going to come in because it came in after the last time we had you on the show. We got a woman who's wanting to get pregnant and wanting to know. So we talk about what they want to know. What is the protocol essentially? So what do they need to do? What do they need to stay away from? And how? Because there are a lot of questions that came in after the last time you were on about how can I limit my environmental toxin load? You know, do I need to go live someplace on an island, or is there a way that I can keep working my job and really substantively limit my toxic load?
The practicality of it, David.
Yeah, what's the protocol?
Okay, now look, this is really important, and we're developing some low-cost tests that we'll have that will allow people with a drop of blood to measure their toxic load, their metal contents, so that they're going to be able to go ahead and understand this. So I just talked to a mother that had a child with autism, and she did everything right except her levels of mercury and lead were sky high. And the mercury came from eating fish, sushi, and the lead came from bad pipes in her home. That's why it's very important that we have a program where we have doctors that can work with families to make sure that they're tested so they know where they stand. Now, in terms of a toxic-free food, the pesticides are really easy. If you eat organic food, within 4 to 5 weeks, your system will be reduced by 90% the organophosphates and organochlorines. By law, they have to have a 7-year half-life. So that's really simple.
So that's step number one, Dave. I'm just going to try and outline these for parents and emphasize them.
Step number one is absolutely do not eat out at restaurants with food that you don't know where it comes from. A lot of it is loaded with pesticides and metals, especially seafood. So eat at home, eat organic food from trusted sources. And then in terms of metals, metal comes from, a lot of the mercury is coming from raw fish. So just be smart about that. You know, make sure that the food that you have is not contaminated, because it goes right to baby.
Okay.
So eating a peach, for example, that has pesticides is about like smoking 8 cigarettes. It's just not worth it. It's an incredible impact to the baby.
Right.
So the second thing is you have to have pure water. Water has so many problems with it that if you drink water from the tap, you have a problem. But here is the other tip. 80% of the pollutants from waters come from showers and baths. women and men like to take long showers and baths, especially when they're pregnant. And you cannot do that unless you put a filter on the shower head.
Okay.
80% will come through the shower. The other thing is lipsticks, personal care products. A lot of lipsticks have so much lead in it. The lipstick from the lead alone can affect a baby. Some of it's loaded with lead. So the Environmental Working Group, and we will have all of this information on the site when it's launched. But for women now that are looking for those solutions now, it is go to the websites and find out, or go to Whole Foods and get your cosmetics from there. A lot of these cosmetics that you put on your skin, they go right into the bloodstream and right into the baby. So do not use those. There's very little regulation on that.
And David, aren't there just common sense things like do not dye your hair while you're pregnant?
Absolutely, do not dye your hair.
Right.
Or if you dye your hair, go to Whole Foods because they have chemicals, because it goes right into baby.
Yes.
Also, do not go in heavily polluted areas. If you live next to a freeway, put HEPA filters, portable ones in your car. Absolutely have a HEPA filter in your bedroom. So it takes the contaminants out of the air. Those about $100 at Costco. So these are the common sense things to do. Then when the baby is born, do not have the baby room filled with toxics in the air.
You're frozen on us a little bit, David.
Let's see if we get him right back. David, you're frozen a little bit, but let's,
because this is important. I want to go over the. Oh, there he is.
We got you.
David, we lost you when you were talking about toxins in the baby's room.
Baby's room, like fresh carpeting, paint.
Yeah, put a barrier between baby and the crib that's been sprayed with arsenic. Put a barrier on your mattress so that you don't absorb antimony. The average mother's breast milk has 100 times the safe level of antimony. It's from the fire retardant in the mattresses. Put a barrier down so that you're able to protect yourself from that. Again, with breast milk, that's the most important thing for a year, but you have to be careful. And then prenatal supplements are incredibly important. And I could have a whole program about the fetal origin theory and how important it is.
Can you just give us a couple of important ones? We've heard folic acid, vitamin D. Can you give us a few that you feel are the top ones for a woman who is pregnant?
Yeah, we have been working with Dr. Berger for a couple of years on the ultimate prenatal formula at Kirkman. And part of it is, for example, David has found that when he's done genetic tests, 25% of the women cannot absorb folic acid. So we're making a form of folic acid that's absorbable for all women. Omega-3s are absolutely critical during prenatal times. Vitamin D levels have got to be at 4,000 IUs a day. And there's some unbelievably good studies that alone can cut down on prenatal births as much as 50% and preeclampsia by 80%. Most vitamin D levels are 400 IU. They should be at 4,000 IU. So the blood levels become 50 to 70 nanograms per milliliter. So the whole area of great eating and taking supplements that cannot be really gained entirely from the foods, and then take supplements after the birth, because obviously you're basically providing nutrition for yourself and baby. And again, we got to have a whole program on the importance of vitamin D for not only during pregnancy, but also for the infant and tooth and bone structure and a whole bunch of things.
Right. What about...
The evidence is very, very clear, and that is that so many things have a direct impact on babies. So those are the fundamentals. If you can do those, we'll have a tremendous difference.
One other question, David, and that's food preparation. You know, you're talking about mother's milk being best. In my case, my son was adopted. You know, we're going back, 10 years now. But, I did the formula, and in those days we heated things in the microwave, and we weren't so careful about what we cooked in. That's important, is it not?
Absolutely. If you cook and you use Teflon, that Teflon will go into baby. It'll go into you. It'll go into breast milk. PCBs from the plastics. So it's common sense. It's glass and ceramic. And, here's the thing. Once we found out everything was going to baby, it's a game changer. It means that people have to be careful, and you can live in the real world, and you can have clean blood. And here's sort of the last comment, is women are concerned about their own level of toxicity. The blood clears itself in a very short amount of time. It may be in your tissues, but the tissue is not going into baby. That's the reason you don't need to detoxify. What you need to do is avoid.
Okay, that's
And
really
by
essential.
Your
Very.
blood cleans up very quickly.
So avoid. That
Avoid.
very important. Avoid.
Don't worry about detoxing, worry about avoiding.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really essential.
Right.
Now
Detoxing actually will create all of the toxins of your tissues coming out. You just absolutely don't want to do
All
that.
right.
Okay,
Okay,
good,
so
good
that's
point.
a perfect start. Now we had another question about the Denver early model, and they want to know what is the difference between that and ABA.
It's a form of ABA that was developed by Sally Rogers and by Dr. Dawson. Dr. Granpeesheh is probably the world's expert on it.
Okay.
You know, 1-year-old is a much simpler program, and that's why we're convinced we can do it with videos on our site. We can teach parents how to do it, and they can avoid having expensive ABA people come into their homes.
When do you think
sorry
that
all
will?
those ABA trainers out there, but this can be done by parents.
When do you think that will be available for the general public?
We're going to launch the site probably in November and December, and so we're going to work with people to develop this, and we hope to have it ready sometime by the first of the year and available free to everybody.
So we'll obviously be covering that here on Autism
Absolutely.
Live and letting
We wanna be a part
families
of it.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. We've only got a couple of more minutes, so I wanted to take just a second and ask you personally for the families that are watching and listening to this. And I know this wasn't the topic because we were talking about prediction and prevention, but if you could take just a minute to talk to the families that it's already well past that. They've got the 8-year-olds, they've got the 9-year-olds. Is there a place that you recommend they go to hear more about what you say, or can we just book you for another show to talk about what to do for those kids?
Well, we started a group called MAPS, which is, I was one of the founders, Medical Academy for Special Needs Pediatricians, and it's very successful. We're developing great protocols, but eventually going online with CME courses, training a whole bunch of healthcare professionals and doctors so that we can bring real treatment and we can level the playing field so every parent will know exactly what's new, what's out there. We get rid of all of these things that are not providing benefit. And it's really important we develop treatment, and that's not the subject of this program, but I'm just as passionate about that. Yeah. I really want to be able to say, and the last comment is, the age between 20 and 30 is 10 times the death rate with autistic adults. And it's not because it has to be that way. It's they're not getting medical treatment. They're dying of seizures and heart attacks at 10 times the rate. We have to bring treatment solutions all through the lifespan, and we're also dedicated to that. It's just not the subject of this program.
Right.
Right, absolutely.
And we'll do that as a subject because we do have a lot of parents out there with kids that are, you know, in elementary school and older, high school, and even young adults that can be helped tremendously by the information you're providing.
Right. Right. And again, it's the same thing as the childhood gut conditions. It's homocysteine levels being too high. It's taurine levels not being right, causing seizures. I mean, a lot of it is simple, but we need CME courses and training. But the parents need to have access to the same information the doctors are getting so that they can, and that's the big shift we're taking. We have to democratize this information, and we have to make it current.
And we will continue to cover, as you move closer to having this network happen in November or December of this year, and so people can tune in here. But is there any other place, too, that you want to direct them to find out more information about? And it's VHI?
Yeah, it'll be called VHI, and it'll become part of a project of the Autism Forum, the Northwest Autism Foundation. Our director is Beth McShane, and she's great. And look, anybody can call me personally or write me personally, and I obviously answer everything I get, and I'll provide as much help on a one-on-one basis as I can. I did learn from the great man that it is one-on-one. So
they contact you at Kirkman?
dkhumphrey@gmail.com.
Oh, say that again, David. I was interrupting you.
dkhumphrey@gmail.com.
Okay.
And so I'll provide as much help or links to whoever I can get help for them and get me on any issue.
Thank you so much for all that you're doing and for being with us and taking the time to do this today. You really made today special.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and it's exciting to be part of this.
Thank you
so much, David.
You have a great week.
Okay.
Really remarkable. And I have to say, I feel like I wanted it to feel like we had gone to a seminar today or a summit, and I feel like
learned
I feel that way.
Wow, I'm kind of. I hope I hope we had a lot of viewers today, because I think that between Dr. Granpeesheh, Dr. Levenson, and David Humphreys, we have given a lot of hope and given a lot of
information.
A lot of information, and I know that can be overwhelming. And I just want to caution parents out there and support givers not to be overwhelmed, because I remember leaving conferences going, oh, where do I start? You know, first you get, now I've got the information, where do I start?
Yeah.
Start where you are.
Yeah, that's exactly
Start where you are. If you feel that you might be able to, you know, look into the biomedical that you haven't before, start there. Start looking at diet. Start looking at some dietary interventions. Start cleaning up the diet. Start looking at supplements. It's a great time of year. Start
great time of year to go
home.
Organic.
Yes. Really great time of year to go organic.
Because now is when it's prevalent. It's a much easier time.
And as a matter of fact, at our Act Today for Military Families Run and Festival, they had a community farm that provides organic to your door, and I thought, it's too expensive. They had a whole thing showing me how it's so much less expensive because you don't have the supermarket overhead.
Yeah.
And they deliver it once a month. I get a $20 box, and this is going to last us for a month. We were actually looking in a break at rhubarb recipes, because I said to Shannon, rhubarb came with my package.
But it is good. It's really good to be looking at these things, and that's just one of the things, but it's something you can start today.
Right.
That's something that we can all do. And then you can go back, because we podcast for free these episodes, you can go back and watch and use these as a reference. I thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me for an extra hour.
And we thank our fabulous guests, Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh, CJ Miyake, who came in and talked about gaming to help with behavioral training.
Yes.
And then, of course, the fabulous Dr. Andrew Levenson and David Humphrey
from Kirkman.
from Kirkman Labs. And I want to encourage you to check out what they have at Kirkman Labs.
You know, you need to get pharmaceutical grade supplements. Another important thing. It's a difference. It's a difference.
It is absolutely
you know, your fish
difference.
oil is different that you're going to get from Kirkman. So let's just say that right there.
And
Act Today provides grants for that. Let me get that plug in too for medical treatment.
Yes, absolutely. We thank you for all the time that you've spent with us today. We are completely out of time, but we will be back here. We're not doing a live show tomorrow. We'll be back here on Tuesday, and you won't want to miss that. We're starting off May with a bang.
And I'll see you next week.
Yes. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me. And remember, worry is a form of negative prayer.
Bye-bye.